with his title.
Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, 102.5, 106.3, The Game and the Game Nashville app. We are streaming live on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook Live every single day. And we are broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. So we are just over a week away from the NFL draft. It feels like we're about 17 months away from the Stanley Cup playoffs. But Adam Vingan will join us in 1 hour. He will join us every single Wednesday throughout the playoffs. Jonathan Hutton will join us at 1 p.m. Normally he joins us at noon. I had a little bit of a shakeup today. So Vingan will normally join us at 1 p.m. on Wednesdays as the Predators make their way throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs. We'll hit on that with Vingan. We'll touch on the NFL draft with Jonathan Hutton. But Willy D-Mase are both here. How are we doing today? Happy Wednesday.
Hey, happy Wednesday. It didn't start off too well for me, but I mean, I take everything in stride. I told you, Caroline, once again, woke up this morning, woke up a little bit late, didn't mind waking up a little bit late.
Oh, nice.
I think the dogs mind. They wanted to get outside, so I wake up, and I thought I rolled over on a remote while watching television last night and cut off the TV, and I was like, okay, cool. I'm glad I did. So walking around the house, just minding my business, and I noticed that everything is off. And so I think it's just a power outage. Okay. So I go outside, let the dogs out in the backyard. We walk around the house. I see the two houses next door. They're building. Their lights are on.
Uh-oh. What is going on?
And I thought to myself, yep, I forgot to pay my bill. Forgot to pay my NES bill. So this
is not the first time.
It's not the first time. Because it's the only bill that I don't have on auto pay. Because those electric bills they spike, and I have to call the place hey, listen, there's something wrong. I just don't want them to take it out of my account, and then I have to go fight and try to get the money back. And typically when you have to fight to get your money back, you ain't getting your money back. Uh-huh. I would rather fight and then pay them once we've cleared everything up.
Don't go down without a fight, D-Mase.
Absolutely. So I did not have electricity. I almost had to take a cold shower. Eventually it came on. I called, came back on. So I'm great, but I take everything in stride. I just laughed about it this morning. Just went about my business.
What are you going to do?
Exactly. It's nothing I can do. Just hope they turn it on before I have to come here.
Because
I wanted to take a shower. It was, once I got off the phone with the lady, and she was really nice, it took about 5 minutes to come back on. She said, it will take in between, it can take up to 2 hours. And I'm thinking, looking at my watch, that's going to put me at 10 o'clock. Man, it's going to be rushing.
She's probably saying, well, then pay your damn bill,
Exactly,
Derek.
Absolutely. So she said it'd be about 2 hours. I said, okay. I just kind of, okay. But then 5 minutes later, came back on. So there you go.
I did that one time with my water bill.
Uh-huh. See,
totally forgot to pay it one time. Just brain cramped and sitting on my porch, and the guy just comes up in the truck and just goes to the street, opens up the thing on the thumb, and just cuts the water off.
You're like, what you doing?
What are you doing over there? And he was like, see ya. And then I walked back in. We had no water. I was like, what happened?
What was
and
that
I looked,
for?
I was like, oh, you idiots. That is inconvenient.
Yes. No water?
No water.
I can deal with no electricity, but no water, that's different.
Hey, cold showers aren't bad. You just got to get used to them.
A cold shower is better than no shower.
You're right about that. Yeah.
Can't get water.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You don't like the cold shower?
Depending on what time of year it is.
I've tried, because I've heard, it's good for your skin. It wakes you up. I've tried it. I can't do it.
Yeah,
it's a maximum of 30 seconds that I'm standing there absolutely miserable. Then I'm like, okay, nope, done. Turn the hot water all the way up. I cannot do a cold shower.
You got to ease into it. You go from hot, then you go to a little bit of warm, and you're like, all right, if I can deal with this.
No, it's like no cold water. I mean, no hot water, period. It's like, if I don't
I'm just saying to get into it.
Okay.
I'm cold showered through and through, but you get to the point where it's like hot.
You take a cold shower every day?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man,
Nick,
you're
that is
crazy.
awfully impressive.
Yeah, you're crazy, Nick.
So during high school, this quick little tidbit. During high school, the soccer team, we were on a state title run. We had this little challenge. If we all just took a cold shower, whoever cracked first would basically have to run extra.
Okay.
At the time, I was a little heavier. I was like, I'm not running extra for this purpose. So I just took a cold shower every day. It benefited me in the weight room. It benefited my diet, benefited my skin. I told my mom about it because she, does hair for a living. She's like, oh, yeah, really good for your skin. Starts glowing. I was like, oh, yeah, glow, whatever. But, yeah, I see some benefits for it.
There you go.
I have noticed that Nick's skin is very glowy.
Yeah, it is glowing.
You are awfully glowy, Nick.
Thanks.
Glowy Nick.
Now we know the secret.
Absolutely.
See, those
try
are
this.
benefits that I'm willing to pass on.
Cold
For a
showers
nice,
and olive
comfortable
oil,
shower.
Willie. Cold showers and olive oil.
There
Spoken
you
like
go.
a true Italian. All right, so like I mentioned, we are just over 1 week away from the NFL draft, 1 week from tomorrow. And yesterday we were breaking down an article in The Athletic put out by Alec Lewis, and it breaks down, what's the best strategy for drafting. And it went back through, these data analysts who crunched all the numbers and looked at all different things and trading up and trading back and which pick is most valuable, so on and so forth, crunching all of these numbers from the drafts between 1988 and 2004. And some of the findings that they came up with, some of their conclusions, one was trading back is more advantageous through all of the numbers that they crunch. So we kind of posed that question as far as the Titans are concerned in this year's draft. In the first round and the second round, should the Titans trade back? And I think that has to be, the follow-up question should be like, well, who's available? Who is there at 7? Are you going to trade back if Joe Alt's at 7? I don't really think that that's a wise move. Do you have a trade partner? How far do you trade back? What's the compensation? All of these different layers that come with the question of should the Titans trade back? So this is a question that Nick Suss of the Tennessean looked into in a recent article. It's a great is here prospect. So Nick goes through all of Nick goes through all of the teams picking after the Tennessee Titans and looks at all of their needs. Number 8, the Falcons, their top needs, wide receiver, edge rusher, cornerback. The Bears at number 9. Of course, we know they needed a quarterback. We know they'll address that need with the first overall pick. But with the 9th overall pick, they could take an edge rusher. They could take a receiver. The Jets at 10. They have needs on the offensive line, wide receiver, and safety. Even though they got Tyron Smith in free agency, still some of their needs. The Vikings, we know that they need tackles or a quarterback. Probably will plan on drafting a quarterback in this year's draft. The Broncos at 12, we know that they need a quarterback. They need defensive players. So Nick's conclusion is, when looking at the teams picking below the Titans, looking at the needs of those teams, looking at the players that most likely will be available at those teams, Nick writes, so how far can Tennessee Titans trade down and get Joe Alt? Nothing is ever really safe in the NFL draft. Teams can always trade in front of the Titans if they move back or go off script and pick the best player available over need. But if the teams picking after the Titans at 7 stick to their spots and pick according to their most pressing needs, there's no reason the Titans wouldn't be able to move back 2 or 3 spots at least, and 6 spots at most to get their guy. So Nick Suss is writing that he thinks the Titans could trade back to 13 with the Raiders and still get Joe Alt. Do we agree?
I mean, it can happen, but as we know, the NFL draft is a circus. It's the predictable becomes the unpredictable. The only predictability is that Caleb Williams, I predict he goes number 1. And I'm probably 99.9% sure that that's going to happen. So there's still a 0.01% it won't, but more than likely it will. So you got to deal with the unpredictability of the draft. It takes one move to throw off the draft, at least for the first 15 picks. So based upon what he wrote, which was really good, and it's sort of certain scenarios that would happen in order for the Titans to be able to move down that far and still get their guy in Alt, if indeed they choose to go with him. It depends on those teams in front of the Titans, and then I think you got to do it. It has to be done systematically. It has to be done. It can't be done too soon, moving. And obviously you can't do it too late, but you can't do it too soon because what you don't want to do is move back and then somebody else jump ahead of you.
Or lose your leverage.
Exactly, and you lose your leverage. So you got to do it sort of the perfect timing. So I think they going down to 13. Oh man, that may be a little bit too far. I can see 9, 10, 11, but 13, I think you're kind of pushing it.
As I said yesterday, I like the idea of trading down.
Mm-hmm.
I think you have to be realistic, though, and be ready to not get one guy. If it is Alt, I mean, we're all assuming that Alt is a guy that they either have to have or would like to have, but I think it's more of the would like to have. But if you can't get him, like if you trade down, you have to say to yourself, this is worth it even if we don't get Alt. To me, that would be, if you're going down that far, things can happen, right? Somebody else trades up that does want Alt, right? You can say, well, this team doesn't want Alt, and that team's going to take a quarterback, and this you can do all that, but still somebody throws you a curveball. So you have to be prepared to say, do we like who we know is going to be in that spot? Even if it's not Alt, are there 2 or 3 other guys that we know mathematically will be in there? To me, that would be worth it. That would be worth it. If you love the board, let's just say, for example, that you have 3 or 4 guys, and Bowers is one of them, maybe one of the wide receivers, maybe it's the other tackle that everybody's talking about that you say, well, we think this guy is just as good. I think that's the scenario where you would drop that far down. And if you're getting another pick or two, a good pick or two, then to me that is something you have to consider.
I think that's the key point there, Willie. And it's the board, not the player or the prospect. Because could the Titans trade back to 13 and could Joe Alt be available for the taking at 13? Sure. Anything is possible. Could the Chicago Bears end up taking Drake May at 1? Sure. They could. I don't think it's very likely. Just like I don't think that Joe Alt falling to 13 is very likely. And if that's the Titans draft strategy of, we can just, trade back to 13 and then Joe Alt's going to be there, then I think they're overly naive. And I think that's a horrendous strategy to say, the guy that we for sure want is going to be there, so we're going to go ahead and do it. Nothing is guaranteed in the NFL draft. So I think that's the key, Willie. If you're sitting at, let's say the Giants are picking at 6. The Raiders pick up the phone and they say, we'll give you, let's just say, a second in next year's draft to come up to 7. And there are a list of 5 to 6 prospects that you love, that you think can be game changers for you right now, whoever that is. If that's 4 or 5 different tackles, if that's a mix of 3 tackles and Brock Bowers and a handful of wide receivers and maybe Dallas Turner in there, but you feel like you would be happy walking away from the first round with any of those players, then I think that you can live with that. Depending on the compensation, if you feel like that's fair compensation to move back and miss out on an opportunity to take Joe Alt, if Joe Alt is in fact there for the taking at 7. So I think you have to really think about, who do we really like? Do we need Joe Alt and he's available to us at 7? If you need him, then you take him and you don't trade back and just cross your fingers that he's going to be there at 13. Because like Nick Suss mentions in his article, and like you brought up, Willie, you're not the only one in the draft that can move around. Everybody else can move around too. There are other tackle-needy teams in this draft that might be sitting at, and I don't have the draft order up in front of me, but let's say they're sitting at 16, and they think, I'll trade up to 9 with the Bears so I can take Joe Alt.
16 happens to be Denver.
16 Seattle.
All right.
Seattle. Is it Seattle? Yeah, 16 is Seattle, unless I'm looking at a different one.
You're correct. 16 is Seattle.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay.
Why am I seeing? I'm looking at Nick's article here.
12 is
flipping
Denver.
around.
Yeah, Denver's at 12.
Denver's at
12 is
12.
Denver. Seattle 16.
I picked a range.
Nick has
Yeah, he
another
has a
trade
trade.
in there,
Yeah, he
Seattle
has
and
a
Denver,
trade.
that
Yeah.
flip-flop
He
those
said
2
he
picks.
flip-flopped
Okay.
those 2
Okay,
picks.
Nick,
But
I
other
follow you,
teams
Nick.
can move.
Okay, I got you now, Nick.
Yeah.
But that's why this article I thought was worth discussing a lot yesterday of what's in the big picture. Like for this year's team, I think if you're just looking at this year's Titans team, you're saying, well, look, we've got to have a left tackle. This is what they've addressed all these things. They have not addressed left tackle. Take the left tackle.
Yeah.
But in the broader sense, in the big picture, the macro look that this article really shed some light on, the reality is the chances of the number 7 player and the number 13 player, the 7 player being way, way better, is minuscule in the big picture over time. right? I think if you listed all the number 7 overall picks and all the number 13 overall picks over a 20-year span, there's probably not a lot of difference in the performance. We could probably argue back and forth. We'd probably debate a few players. But I think you would probably say that it's almost about the same, right? And so if you look at it that way, and you get an extra pick, you get that third-round pick back, which is, I think, what Nick is proposing that you would get. You would get the third-round pick back that you don't have right now. Then I think there's a lot of value there, especially if you're not, dead set on having to get the one guy.
Yeah, and that's that's the sort of the crux in all this. We don't know if Alt is their guy. How do they have them ranked on the board, and who do they have ranked on the board in regards to that 7th pick? Is it just Alt and Alt alone, and then everybody else sort of falls down, or is it horizontal? It's Alt, it's who else? Fashnu. It could be Latham, and then it could be another guy.
Marius Mims.
Yeah, but then it could be another guy totally not like a defensive end or wide receiver. Exactly. So you have these 3, 4, 5 individuals on a horizontal plane. Now, if you have it like that, then okay. I think the likelihood of you moving down, it's more likely for it to happen because you have 3 or 4 guys that you potentially take at that position rather than just one. If you're thinking just Alt, you can't move down too far because you risk losing him. But if you have 3 or 4 guys on there, you're more willing to move down because you figure, if I don't get Alt, if he doesn't follow me, we feel comfortable with the Latham or a Fashnu or one of these other top 2 or 3 tackles. Like, we're not just hell-bent on taking Alt, because if you're hell-bent on taking Alt, you got to be very calculated on how you move and when you move, because if you move at the wrong time, i.e. what happened last year when all that stuff got out about them wanting to take a quarterback, it got out too soon, and Houston ended up flipping the script, and they end up drafting the 2 guys that are cornerstones of their franchise. Well, you can't let this out early. If you have Alt as your number, like, he's the guy that you got to draft.
Well, I'll ask you guys, if you're hell-bent on taking Joe Alt, which from every mock draft that we've seen, I think everyone else is hell-bent on the Titans taking Joe Alt. I don't know how they feel. But if you're hell-bent on taking Joe Alt, can you move?
You can't.
I don't think you can.
Yeah, you got to stay at the 7th pick. If that is the guy you want,
he's more valuable than any other pick that you're going to pick up later in the draft.
Yeah, you have to stay put at the 7th pick if indeed he's the guy that you want to get, or your margin of error is very slim. You can't go down to 13. You may not be able to go down to 11. You got to stay in between that 7 and 10. Just to if that's the guy that you like, we got to have him, or else, But if you have 2 or 3 guys, top tackles, you would be more willing to move. You have a little bit more leeway in what you can do and how you're going to draft. So the 3 guys are there. Yeah, I would move out of that space if I got 3 guys that are sort of on the same tier. They're not too far off from one another. So, they got to be very careful with this, because you don't want to happen what happened last year in regards to stuff getting out, and then you can't. You try to move and it's too late.
It does feel like this go around, things feel pretty hush hush.
Yeah, and it should be.
I think everyone assumes the Titans are going to take the best tackle available just because that's such an obvious and glaring need.
But the Titans hadn't said anything about that.
That's our feeling. That's the draft evaluators' feelings. Those are NFL insiders' feelings. That's nothing that they've tipped off to us. If anything, I feel like the Titans have kind of quieted, or at least attempted to quiet, some offensive line talk by saying, it's a deep tackle draft. We really like the receivers, so on and so forth. It feels like they're not tipping their hand one way or another, and that's a good thing. But I will say this. If you can move back to 13 and still get Joe Alt, Great. GM of the year. Go Ryan Carthon. All right, we'll continue this conversation coming up next. Want to get your thoughts on this as well. 615-737-1025 is the phone number. Again, Nick Suss's article in the Tennessean. He thinks that the Titans can trade back as far as 13, and Joe Alt could still be available there just based off of the needs of the teams picking after the Titans currently at 7. Want to get your reaction to that. Plus, another scenario that we've been talking about, not just trading back, but also the what if Joe Alt isn't there at 7 scenario. Matt Miller, an ESPN NFL draft insider, did his own breakdown, what his prediction is or his mock draft is for that exact scenario. We'll get into that coming up next. Adam Vingan will join us in 30 minutes. We'll preview Vancouver Canucks. We'll talk Nashville Predators and the NHL playoffs, and we'll get into that at noon. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, we are brought to you by Zen Sports. Start earning cash rewards on your bets today. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older and in Tennessee to bet.
What are they saying in regards to draft, whether to move up or move back? What is better? What would be beneficial to some of the guys that you've spoken with, some of the GMs that you've spoken with?
I think most guys, because they understand the unpredictability of drafting players, they want more picks. Mm-hmm. And so moving back a couple spots, picking up a fifth rounder, moving back a couple spots, picking that matters because when you draft, Kevin Byard, in a later round, well, if you messed up the first round, you got the ability to say, yeah, but look what I did in the later round. You know what I mean? Check that guy out. Most guys want more picks because, if we just think about certain general managers and how we talk about them. Hey, John Lynch. Hey, he drafted Brock Purdy. He also drafted Trey Lance. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the wins, and some of it's just the narrative in general and that type of thing. But you can tout the wins, you can tout the good players, but it's when you get somebody wrong in a critical spot and you don't have other picks to counterbalance the getting that wrong, then it gets you in trouble, right? And so, if you, if it's you can get a lot right, but if you're just getting a couple things right and you get Josh Freeman and Aurelius Ben wrong, then you're out. It's just that's how this works, and I think that most guys would rather move back, have more picks because you're bound to hit on somebody in that environment.
That was ESPN NFL analyst Tim Hasselbeck on our show earlier. Caroline Willy D-Mase had joined Nashville Superspeedway in the city of Lebanon for Speedway on the Square this Saturday, April 20th from 1 to 6 p.m. in downtown Lebanon. Stop by and bring the family for a day filled with inflatables, face painting, balloon art, live music, and a ticket giveaway to the Ally 400 NASCAR Cup Series race at 3:30 p.m. So what Tim is saying there makes a ton of sense. You might say, picking up a sixth rounder. Well, that sixth rounder could be David Long Jr. Or it could be Brady Breeze. You never know. I would say more often than not, fifth, sixth, seventh rounders, you're taking a flyer. It's a guy that you think could be good, but if he's not, it's fine, and you can figure it out and move on from him, and it'll be fine. So I understand Tim's approach, and I don't think he's wrong. That you can find really quality players later in the draft if those are picks that you pick up by moving back in the draft. But the big question is, who's available at 7? And is the player that you could get at 7, whether that's alt or not, more valuable than what you could pick up later in the draft?
I think Tim did a good job of explaining it. I think of something like a 3-point shooting contest. If I hit 4 for 10, and somebody else hits 3 for 6. Like in basketball, you're like, man, 3 for 6, that's good. You're 50%. I'm 4 for 10. My percentage is lower. You missed 6, man. You had your air ball in there. You have to be prepared for people to be talking about the air ball and the ones you missed. But if I have 4 hits, 4 makes, and you have 3 makes, my team is better. You would think, right? Now we can dial down to all of how good are the hits. Right? Is it a single? Is it a double, triple, home run?
Yeah.
All of that gets put in there. But I think by and large, that throw at the dartboard, the extra throws, especially where the Titans roster is right now, I want more throws at the dartboard. So if I can get it, that's what I'm looking for. That I'm looking for all opportunities to do that.
Yeah, and those later round picks, those picks eventually they become critical in later rounds, I think. In regards to, not necessarily, let me take that back. Not necessarily critical. I was thinking about the first pick. If I have, based upon what you said, Willie, if I have 10 picks, I need to make sure that first and possibly those 2 picks are hit as possible.
If you have 1 pick in the first and then 9 in the
exactly.
6th,
I have to make sure that those early picks that I have, they are hits.
Yeah.
Now the later picks, I can sort of play around with. I heard Chase and Big Joe talking about Milton.
Oh, boy.
Milton is one of those picks that you can say, you know what? Since I got 10 picks, I think I did very good on my 4 picks. Let me take a flyer on a Milton in the 7th round or the 6th round, late in the 6th or in the 7th. You can do that because you got multiple picks. And a lot of times, because of that, it's going to sort of throw the numbers off a little bit because you really dug in with those first 3 picks because you had to get those right. Then the other picks you get, it's like, okay, let's just take a flyer on this guy. We like who he is. We had the interview. He has some upside. Let's see if we can get more out of him.
Yeah, like if you miss on a 6th round
exactly.
pick, you're not getting fired.
Absolutely. But you need to hit or close to it on those early round picks because if you don't, eventually that's what's going to erode your roster, i.e. the Tennessee Titans the last couple of years.
I think the Titans need to hit on their 1st round pick. I'm not going to say 7th because it might not necessarily be the 7th, but they need to hit on their 1st and they need to hit on their 2nd.
Their early round picks they need to hit on. I truly believe
because they're behind.
Exactly, because they're behind. Yes,
I think realistically, if you take 10 drafts, your batting average, you need to come out of there with like 3 or 4 good players on an average, right? But so they're below average because we've gone through it many times. Those 3 drafts in a row, you're like, ooh, kind of dry, kind of in the desert here. So you need to make up for it by a couple of good drafts strung together. That's how they've got to make it work. And you have more chance of getting big impact guys earlier in the draft than later in the draft.
And when we talk about, at 7, it's easy for us to pick apart, who you take or trade back or not, or, this is a position of need. Let's say 4 or 5 years from now, let's say Joe Alt's gone at 5. That pushes Malik Neighbors down to the Titans at 7. And I'm just using those 2 as an example. If Malik Neighbors ends up being the next Justin Jefferson, in 5 years, we're not going to be talking about how the Titans needed a left tackle. But I understand how that would be the initial reaction. Which brings me to Matt Miller's recent mock draft in the first 10 picks of the 1st round. He explores that exact scenario, which I think is kind of the nightmare scenario for a lot of Titans fans, is Joe Alt's off the board at 5. We talked to TD about this earlier in the week. I asked him, if Joe Alt's not at 7, what do you do? And he was like, it feels too good to be true that he's going to be there. That your number 1 position of need could be addressed by the best player in this draft, and he just falls to you. And TD was like, I trade back best player? Like, I don't know. It's a sticky situation to be in. So in Matt Miller's mock draft, he has Joe Alt going to the Chargers at 5. I don't predict that happening, but we can get into that later. So he has the Titans sticking at 7 and taking Rome Odunze. Before we get into what Matt Miller said and the justification for that, if that's what the Titans came out of the 1st round with, how would you feel?
About the particular player, I would feel good about the particular player. But honestly, I would be worried about the position that you didn't address right now. Because who's to say that, those other tackles are going to be there unless you make a trade and end up moving back up in the 1st round or moving up in the 2nd. But then what does that do? It takes away picks from you. So the player, no. Because I think Rome Odunze is a hell of a player, or at least a hell of a college player. Will he be a hell of a, NFL player? Yet to be seen, but the predictors are there to say he will be successful. But I'm talking about the position, and if Alt is still there, I don't see how you unless
Alt was gone in this scenario.
Oh, Alt was gone. I don't see how you then either don't move out of that pick, or how do you have them ranked, your tackles? That's if you have Alt and the next guy close, then you go with the next guy. Alt's not there, you take the next guy. If the next guy is, say, 2 slots or 3 slots back, then you move back. But I don't think you can. They need a tackle, and I'm hell bent on them needing a tackle because I've seen this team. We've all seen this team over the last 2 seasons. We've seen this team even when Taylor Lewan was hurt. They struggled at that position at times.
Heck yeah.
So they need to get them a left tackle. They need to get the best left tackle on the board. And even if that means trading back, if Alt's gone, trading back into the spot that you feel comfortable taking that next tackle.
Assuming there's a trade partner.
Yeah, assuming there's a trade partner, yes.
Now, let me throw a hypothetical at you.
Ooh.
Would you be okay if you didn't have? I mean, you're going to have a person standing there at left tackle, right?
Yeah.
Let's hope it's something better than Dillard. Let's just say it's still a filler for a year. I mean, they just traded for a tackle, right? They traded
Leroy
I don't know.
Watson.
Couldn't tell you anything about
Leroy Watson.
Couldn't tell you anything about him.
Took 55 offensive snaps
Exactly.
last year.
Okay.
That's what I
And he
can tell
still
you.
failed.
Let's just assume that he's not the long-term
I'm
solution.
sorry, Leroy. I'm sorry. I'm just these are jokes, Leroy.
He's got the Bill Callahan seal
Exactly.
approval.
Right.
He's got
Bill
my
Callahan
seal.
maybe
Absolutely.
says I could work with this guy if we had to.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to have a placeholder / filler for one more year in exchange for who you thought was the best player, regardless of position, at 7? Like you tell everybody up front, look,
Depends
we
on the
still
place
are looking for a left tackle, but we felt like this guy, because I look at a roster that desperately needs game changers.
Yes. It depends on who the place filler is, and it depends on who the other player is.
Yeah.
Like, is it going to be Dylan Radins? Is going to be your placeholder?
This is again comes back to the
No,
philosophical
thanks.
question I keep asking, and I'm okay with it if you come out and say, which I don't think they will, but I think internally I'm okay with it, and I'd be presenting this to Amy Adams Strunk, is this team isn't going to fix every problem they have in 1 year. I need 2 years.
Yeah.
Now at the end of 2 years, if you're not happy with the direction we're going, then that's on us.
Yeah.
But you cannot tell me that everything can be fixed with this team, with all it's been through, all the changes they're making, the Derrick Henry era, the Mike Vrabel era, the Ryan Tannehill era, the Kevin Byard. We're not going to have a brand new team that is a perfect team, well-oiled machine in 1 year. So there's going to be some holes out there. So can you wait one more year to get the left tackle? It would be hard. But if in exchange for that, you got a dynamic player at 7 that you say, okay, this guy helps change the game, creates matchup problems, etc. Then I could live with that.
I can live with it.
Now don't whiff on that guy.
I can't.
Whoever that is.
That's got to
right.
be
If
like,
it's a Dunze or whoever it is.
right. And also let's not forget that DeAndre Hopkins is in the final year of his contract. Calvin Ridley is 29, going to be 30 years old, as much as he wants to tell us that he's 25.
D-Hop
he's not.
especially. D-Hop, you can't be sitting there going, D-Hop, when the stadium opens, he's still going to be out there catching 100 balls. It's not going to happen, right?
He may be
he's a
still
guy
out
that,
there, but
he's a guy that's helping your young quarterback in the short term, but long term, that's where a wide receiver that if you thought he was a special guy would be worth looking at there.
And I would be willing to work with that because of the Bill Callahan effect. Because I think I can be sold on, look, if we don't get the most elite tackle in this year's draft, we think we can find a pretty darn good one that can be pretty darn good for us because maybe that player has the makings of being a starting left tackle in the National Football League, and whatever his ceiling is, Bill Callahan is going to be able to coach him up to that ceiling. And I don't think that player's on the roster. You can find that player perhaps later in the draft. Is that player going to be as good for you as a Joe Alter and Ola Fashanu? Probably not. But I would be able to live with it if I'm getting a game-changing player, a touchdown scorer in return.
Nah. Give me that tackle. I understand what y'all are saying because you can, we really didn't need that, but it's there, and it's pretty good, so I'm going to take it and I'm going to patchwork this side. I understand what y'all are saying, but we've been to too many years where they've tried to patchwork it, and it has not worked to the effect that it's gotten 2 of your quarterbacks injured. They became collateral damage. I don't want any more collateral damage here. And potentially, as I'm still evaluating my young quarterback, I need to give my young quarterback from a protection standpoint. This is where it all started. I think, again, like I talked about, we forget about what are the fundamentals of football other than scoring touchdowns, scoring points. We know that. Take that out of there. The fundamentals is block and get off blocks. Make the tackles, make a guy miss. Those are the fundamentals. You got to understand, they weren't throwing the football when football first started. They wasn't. It wasn't forward passes. They had to, come to that. So get back to the basics, excuse me. Get you a left tackle, and let's start from there. I understand those other little shiny pieces over there. I get it. Roman Doomsday, that's like a Ferrari. I get it. It would be nice. A Ferrari in my driveway would be nice, but I don't need a Ferrari. I need something that's going to get me from A to B, cost-effective, good, that's going to last. I don't need to be paying over and over again for a Ferrari each and every time. Give me that big dually and put him right there, and I had that big dually for the next 15 years, hauling everything.
Why couldn't Roma Dunze be there for the next
He ain't
15
a dually.
years?
He's a Maserati. He's not a Maserati because that's Marv. He's a Ferrari, you know. You can use it. It's there. It looks pretty, but I can't haul the big stuff in a Ferrari. Can't do it. I can only put one other person in that Ferrari. I can't put a whole bag of people or a whole thing of people in the Ferrari.
I hear it. Totally. 100%.
I need my tackle. I need my dually. We've been through 2 seasons without a big dually on the left side. We need one.
I hear you 100%. That brings up a fair point about, the philosophical question that we've been talking about. The philosophical question that Brian Callahan was faced with in Cincinnati in 2021. Do you take the touchdown scorer or do you take the offensive lineman? Let's get into that coming up next. Do you think if Brian Callahan and the entire Cincinnati Bengals brass, if they could have done it differently, would they have? We'll get into that coming up next. We'll get into your thoughts as well before we catch up with Adam Vingan at noon. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase. This week's Nashville's best deal is Prince's Hot Chicken, the original and iconic hot chicken joint. Get half off a $25 gift card right now while supplies last at thegamenashville.com/deals. Gift card is only good for the Tanger outlets in Antioch and Inside Assembly Food Hall in downtown Nashville.
Let's talk about Zen Sports, the new sports book in Tennessee that brings sports betting to a whole new level, and I mean that literally. When you sign up for Zen Sports, you'll automatically earn up to $1,000 no danger first wager. If your first bet loses, you'll be reimbursed for the amount of your bet up to $1,000. People, Zen Sports offers true odds on all parlays and boosted same-game parlays for all Tennessee sports teams. That means boosted up to 20% over other books in Tennessee. And there's even more good news, people. Zen Sports offers a one-of-a-kind VIP reward program, as I've been telling you for the last 3 or 4 months. If you qualify, you'll earn monthly comps at sport events, concerts, you name it, even sport book bonuses. The VIP program is by invite only. So if you feel that your Zen Sports play qualifies for the VIP consideration, please check out the program details and apply at zensports.com/VIP. So what are you waiting for, bettors? The daily same game parlay boost go quickly. So get going and download their app at zensports.com today. That's Zen Sports, where betting just got better. And also remember, gambling problems, call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 years or older to bet here in Tennessee.
Caroline, Willy, D-Mase. We'll catch up with Adam Vingan in 10 minutes. We'll get his thoughts as we wrap up the regular season and head into the Stanley Cup playoffs. But first, we brought up a question before the break, and we've talked about this a lot. We talked about it when Brian Callahan was on our show about a month or so ago, about the conflict that the Bengals were very famously faced with going into the 2021 draft. Do you take the elite left tackle in Penei Sewell, or do you take the elite touchdown scorer in Jamar Chase? And Brian Callahan said, if all things are equal, I'll go the elite touchdown scorer over the elite non-touchdown scorer. But that's, of course, when all things are equal. Not all things are equal all the time. But I do wonder, if the Bengals could do things differently, would they? Because the Bengals' offensive line is still trash. And Joe Burrow is now getting the reputation of always injured because he's injured a lot. Tore his ACL in his rookie season, got hurt last season, had that horrible sack in the Super Bowl when Aaron Donald just demolished him. So I do wonder. I mean, obviously, it feels like a silly question because Jamar Chase is one of the best wide receivers in the National Football League, that they got to the Super Bowl the year that Jamar Chase was drafted. But if they could have done things differently, would they have taken the left tackle? They're not going to tell you.
Oh, they'll never tell you. I'm trying to look at the tackles that were selected. Penei Sewell was the tackle taken, the first tackle taken right after Jamar. Not right after, but a few picks after Jamar Chase. And then you have Rashad Slater.
Rashad Slater's a solid tackle.
Elijah Vera Tucker. I think that's how you pronounce his name. I have Alex Leatherwood.
I think Alex Leatherwood kind of stinks.
Christian Darrisaw,
yeah.
And that was, Tevin Jenkins. No, that was second round. So there were, 3-4 old linemen taken in the first round that year.
I think Alex Leatherwood may have been a center.
Yeah.
Or a guard.
So, like you said, I don't think they would tell us.
No.
They can't come out and say anything because Jamar Chase is still there and he's balling. And they've got one of the top 6 receivers in the National Football League. And he's produced. But on the other hand, their quarterback keeps getting hurt. Mm-hmm. And I know this last injury, I don't think it was, the injury at the beginning of the season wasn't because of the offensive line. It was just some fluky awkwardness. He was rolling out in practice, and
then there was the wrist.
Yeah, the
wrist or the hand, or
exactly.
Whatever.
But even with those injuries, those specific injuries, Caroline and Willy, it's like I still want. Should I have still taken the offensive tackle, because those injuries can be compounded if we're not protecting our quarterback. That wrist injury can get it becomes a sprain now. What if he falls on it and he re-injures it, or it becomes a break because he's gotten hit from the blind side because the tackle whiffed, and this is probably the 8th time he's whiffed on a pass rusher. So those injuries that he had, even though they wasn't because of the offensive line, they can be compounded because you don't have a good offensive line. But I don't think Cincinnati would look at drafting Jamar Chase as we should have drafted Penei Sewell. I don't think they, it's like,
it's hard to justify.
Exactly, because both guys are really good. Both guys are good at their respective positions. So you can't say, well, dang it, they should have drafted Penei Sewell, because they're getting production out of Jamar Chase.
It's hard to say.
Yeah.
If you could. Chase.
Now, if Chase was just
Chase
a
is
bust,
a game changer.
then okay,
he's a game changer.
Right.
Exactly.
So I think that is the ultimate goal of any draft is can I get one or two guys? One. If you just told me I could get one each year of somebody who really changes the game for you. There's just a lot of ways you can do that. As a tackle can do that. Obviously, a touchdown-making receiver can do that. But somebody who the other team has to say, we got to deal with D-Mase. What are we going to do to try to curtail this? If you have several of those guys, it just makes your job so much easier. So that's the ultimate. So regardless of position, if you come away with those guys, just one per year, you're building a roster.
But it goes back to, is it easier in a sense to find a receiver?
See, that's
Or is it
a great
easier
question.
to find a tackle?
I think it's easier to find a receiver.
Yeah.
Is
I would
what I
tend
would
to
say
think,
just
based
off the
upon
top
the
of my
last
head.
couple of
with
years,
No, I
yeah.
have not done the research on it, but that would be my thought.
Exactly.
If we're going to take the 2021 draft, for example, that's the same year that the Titans picked a tackle in the second round, and that was Dylan Radins.
But they didn't draft him at first. I see.
But I'm saying if the Bengals, if we're talking about taking a receiver in the second round versus a tackle in the second round, I know that's incredibly anecdotal.
I see what you're saying. I
Only
see what
one
you're saying.
example,
Yeah.
but
So the further you get out of the first round, the harder it's going to be to find a tackle.
Sure.
versus maybe a receiver that you
exactly.
can find in the second, third, or fourth
Yeah.
rounds that could have more production for you. But obviously, there's going to be examples on both sides of finding pretty solid tackles or O-linemen in general in the second or third rounds and finding really bad ones and vice versa with wide receivers as well. But I do think it's fascinating. They would never tell you. But if they did take Penei Sewell, would things be different? Would Joe Burrow have stayed upright? Would they have still gone to the Super Bowl? Would we be thinking about the Bengals or Joe Burrow, for that matter, in the same fashion that we do? We'll never know.
I don't think I would enter into that game, right? If you're if you could go back and do it again, would you play that game? I don't think the Bengals would choose to go back and do that.
But I wonder if Brian Callahan has that in the back of his head as he approaches this draft, as he went through this just a couple of years ago and is faced with it again. How much does he look back on that decision and how it kind of paved the way for the Bengals and how that could
History repeating.
potentially do the same?
Yeah.
Exactly.
We must learn from history.
And if history repeated itself and the Titans found themselves in the Super Bowl after the Titans take Roma Dunze at 7, I got no complaints. No complaints whatsoever. All right, maybe we're a week, maybe we're 2 weeks, maybe we're a few days. Who knows how far away we are from the Predators in the Stanley Cup playoffs. But Adam Vingan will join us coming up next. It looks like, contrary to what ESPN says, it looks like the Canucks are the most likely opponent for the Nashville Predators. What does that matchup look like? Adam Vingan will join us coming up next, as he will every single Wednesday throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Hey, it's Derek Mason here, and you've heard me tell you about Dr. Lodge and his staff at Cool Springs MD for some time now. I've shared how they help with imbalanced hormones and how they offer a comprehensive weight loss program that addresses the root cause of weight gain, people. But now I want to tell you about a new laser they offer called Empowered Laser. With this laser, Dr. Lodge and Cool Springs MD can help you turn back the clock and take control of your body, as I am doing right now. I'm 50 years old. I need to take my body back. I don't want to go back to 20, but I darn sure don't want to get no worse than what I am now. I want to get better, and I know you do too as well. Learn about this amazing new laser and how it stimulates, for women, how it stimulates your Kegels in 20 minutes. The only laser indicated for mixed urinary stress incontinence. And hear about the Tone feature. That's what I use it for. A muscle stimulator that increases muscle production and toning in your stomach, which I use, thighs, love handles, arms, and more. Dr. Lodge and his team are ready to help you turn back the clock and take control of your body with the new Empowered Laser at Cool Springs MD. So, people, I know you want to take care of your body. I know you want to take your body back. I know you want your body to look a little younger. If you want to do all of this, then visit CoolSpringsMD.com today and make an appointment.
Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, 1025, 1063, The Game and The Game Nashville app. We're streaming live on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook Live every single day. And we're broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. So we are almost locked in, not quite yet, into the Predators' Stanley Cup playoffs opponent in the first round, at least. It's looking like 91% likely that it is the Vancouver Canucks. So joining us now to preview the Predators in the Stanley Cup playoffs is our friend Adam Vingan, who will join us every single Wednesday throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs. Adam, happy to have you on board weekly. Just want to open it up to how you view the Canucks as a potential opponent for the Nashville Predators.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit last week, and the Canucks clinched their first division title last night, I believe since 2013, by defeating the Calgary Flames. So some history made there, well, it's not really history because they've won division titles before, but it's been a long time since the Canucks won a division title. They've also won 50 games for the first time since 2012. So it's been a while since the Canucks have had this type of success. But sort of what we talked about last week, the Canucks got off to such a great start. But over the past 2+ months, they've been playing slightly above 500 hockey. Since they came back from their All-Star break / bye week on February 6th, the Canucks have a 17-11-4 record, which is a .594 points percentage, which is 14th in the NHL since February 6th. By comparison, the Predators, over that same span, 21-7-3, a .726 points percentage, which is third in the NHL, only behind the New York Rangers, who have won the President's Trophy, and the Carolina Hurricanes. So the interesting thing about the Canucks is they played the past month without their starting goaltender, Thatcher Demko, who suffered a knee injury in early March. He came back last night, made 39 saves on 40 shots in his first game action in about 6 weeks. But when you look at their goals against during the time he was out of the lineup compared to their goals against before he got hurt, they were roughly the same. They actually played really well defensively in his absence. Their offense has cratered compared to the beginning of the season. They're averaging 2.84 goals per game over their past 32 games, which is 24th in the league. So their defense has helped them win a lot more games than their offense over the past few months. So I'm not really sure what kind of Canucks team you're getting. I mean, are you getting a team that's rounding into form? They're playing well defensively. Maybe that offense comes back. Or are you catching a team that got off to such a hot start and has been treading water for most of the past few months? So it makes the Canucks a really fascinating potential first-round opponent.
And not only do you know what Canucks team you're getting, you also don't know when you're going to get them. We heard on the 32 Thoughts podcast with Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick, Elliot said at least, that he anticipates the Canucks' first playoff game to be played on Tuesday, which would be 8 days between the Predators' final game and their first playoff game. I don't know if a team has ever had 8 full days of rest between the end of the regular season and the beginning of the playoffs, Adam. But if that is, in fact, what the case is, how do you approach that week plus of balancing rest and trying to mimic as much in-game play as you possibly can?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I can lean on some experience. Back in 2017, it wasn't the end of the regular season to the first round of the playoffs, but after the Predators swept the Blackhawks in the first round of the playoffs, and Willie can correct me if I'm wrong here, they had at least a week between the end of the Blackhawks series and the beginning of the Blues series. They definitely had a lot of time, and I know they took several days off after the series, and they had some really tough practices. And, I mean, that's really all you can do. I mean, rest is a weapon, I think, at this time of the season. Now, as far as we know, the Predators aren't nursing any significant injuries, but it doesn't hurt to have a little extra time, in my opinion, to rest up, heal up before the grind of the postseason when there are very few days off. And as you said, Caroline, it's been reported in multiple places that we're not really sure what the schedule is going to look like for the Canucks and Predators, if that is indeed the matchup, just because Rogers Arena apparently has a ton of concerts going on in the next few weeks. But it reminded me of, and I don't think this is going to happen, but I think you'll guys get a kick out of this. Back in 2009, I think it was, the Capitals and the Penguins were playing in the playoffs, and Mellon Arena, which is the Penguins' old arena, was having so many events, including a Yanni concert. Remember Yanni, everybody? They were having a Yanni concert that they had to play games 4 and 5 in back-to-back. I think it was game 4 in Pittsburgh, game 5 in Washington, because of a Yanni concert that could not be moved at Mellon Arena. So at least this time, I guess it's like Justin Timberlake and Pearl Jam in Rogers Arena,
Yes.
I think it is. So at least
Better than Yanni, at least.
Yeah, like with Yanni, I'm like, when was Yanni popular? I don't even know. It wasn't in 2009.
We actually, Darren McFarland and I interviewed Yanni at the Super Bowl Radio Row one year, which was quite surreal. Quite surreal.
In what year?
That would have been like 2003.
Okay.
So he might have been past his prime by 2009. So,
right. So at least Justin Timberlake, he's a pop
an
star.
A-list. Yeah, he's A-list.
He's A-list. He's supporting a new album. I guess you don't have to move Justin Timberlake, but the NHL wouldn't move for Yanni. So if they won't move for Yanni 15 years ago, who knows what they'll do this time around? But just because of the significant lengths of the geographical difference between Vancouver and Nashville, it's not like if they were playing Dallas in the first round, which is still a possibility, even though it's a small possibility. Like, that's not a short. They're in the same time zone. It's a short flight. If they had to do it, I mean, you can make an argument for it. But flying to Vancouver from Nashville direct is 4 to 5 hours at least, and crossing multiple time zones. So it just doesn't make sense. I don't think there's any scenario in which those teams will play back-to-back where they have to travel. I wonder if they would play back-to-back if necessary in games 3 and 4, which isn't great, but both teams would have to do it. So there would be no advantage necessarily in both teams having to play it back-to-back. It's not like during the regular season where one team might be playing on the second half of a back-to-back and the other team's been at home resting. Both teams will have to do it, so there's not much of a competitive advantage.
It does appear to be complicated because the Pearl Jam is a 2-concert deal, which takes the arena out of the mix for 3 days, May 4th through the 6th. And so Ryan O'Reilly might be like, hey, is there a way I could get to one of these? Because he is a huge Pearl Jam fan. But that would be very tricky to not have your building available for 3 straight days at the end of a series where, by that time, round 2 is getting going and, like, you're holding up the whole league if you can't stay on pace. So this could be a little complicated. But, Adam, I want to ask you, too, another thing I noticed about Vancouver. I was watching them last night. You mentioned Demko. I think that's a huge thing, getting him back. What version? Because he's had a great year. He's probably going to be a Vezina finalist, probably not win it, but he's probably in the top 3. If he brings that into the playoffs, that makes them so much better. But I look at their lineup. Barry Trotz was asked about this yesterday with Jared. It's no comparison in terms of overall playoff experience. The Predators roster versus the Canucks roster. So what factor do you think that is? Barry Trotz obviously thinks that's significant.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because, sometimes I can see it as an advantage. Sometimes I think it's something that we talk about as a potential advantage, but which may not ultimately have an advantage. But we talked about this last week. The Canucks core players, specifically Elias Pettersson, Quinn Hughes, and Brock Besser, have only appeared in one postseason, and that was in 2020. That was the bubble. They played 17 games, the Canucks did, in that postseason. Demko was the backup goaltender for the Canucks at that time behind Jacob Markstrom. I think he played in 4 games and made 3 starts. So he has even less NHL playoff experience. Their leading scorer, JT Miller, has a lot of playoff experience. He's played in the playoffs with the Rangers. He played with the Lightning. He didn't win he wasn't on any of the cup winning teams with the Lightning, but he did have playoff experience with the Lightning, and then of course with the bubble with the Canucks in the bubble. So he has playoff experience, but it's no contest based on playoff experience, Vancouver versus Nashville. As I stated last week, Ryan McDonough by himself has 185 games of playoff experience. And the only active player with more is Corey Perry, who has, I believe, 196. So by himself, McDonough has more experience than the majority of players on the Canucks, which is why I also wonder if this is a situation where the Canucks might be ripe for an upset, because they don't have that experience. They don't know what it takes to win, quote unquote. And sometimes teams need that experience to ultimately get to where they're going. I've mentioned the Predators as an example of that. I specifically remember 2016, 7 games with the Ducks, 7 games with the Sharks. I remember how important those 2 playoff series were for a lot of the core players on that team: Roman Josi, Philip Forsberg, Matthias Ekholm, Ryan Ellis, etc. So I wonder if this is that year for the Canucks. But I trust Barry Trotz. He knows more about the game than I ever will. He's forgotten more about the game than I'll ever know. So if he thinks it's an advantage, it could be an advantage.
The other thing I think is interesting is the backdrop of Vancouver is if you wind the clock back about a year and a half, they were a total mess. You had Brock Besser, who's had a really good year. He was asking publicly, it was a huge story, I want to be traded. I want out of here. Like they looked like a time where they were going to break up the team. They were looking to just change everything. And then Rick Tocchet has come in and done a tremendous job of galvanizing everything. So it's quite remarkable, the turnaround. I was watching their broadcast last night, and they had a segment in the intermission just talking about how refreshing it's been, because and Adam, you've experienced this, right? Vancouver, if you think things get negative here, Vancouver, there's a lot of negativity around that team. Like, oh, here we go again. They stink. They don't know what they're doing. They had that vibe, but Rick Tocchet has sort of erased that.
Yes. Remember Bruce Boudreau was coaching the Canucks at one point last year,
yes.
And it was dead man walking, and he knew it, and it was very uncomfortable. Like he knew that he was eventually going to get fired. Like he had an idea of when he was going to get fired specifically. Like they were like a stretch of home games before they went on a road trip, or a road trip. Actually, it was the other way around, I think. They were on a road trip before they came home for a long homestand, so he knew he was going to get fired on that day, and he did. And Rick Tocchet, to his credit, you saw the makings of some headway that they were making under Tocchet at the end of last season, and of course this year got off to a great start. He's probably a favorite for the Jack Adams, which, Willy, you vote for. So you'll have a say in who wins the Jack Adams.
He's in there. I think he's a heavy favorite. I think I'd be surprised if he didn't win it.
Right. We've talked about this. I think Andrew Burnett absolutely deserves to be a finalist. But I think that Tocchet, just because the Canucks won their division and were a top team for much of the season, might have an edge over Burnett. Even though because really the Canucks, defied expectations too. Nobody expected them to be this good. But Tocchet's done a really good job. Market, like the Canadian, we know the Canadian markets are much tougher on their teams than their American counterparts for the most part. The Vancouver, because they haven't had much success over the past decade, it gets really negative there. Listening to the 32 Thoughts podcast, and anytime Elliot Freeman talks about the Canucks, there's always that undercurrent of they hate me up there because of all the things I say and all that. There's going to be a lot of pressure on Vancouver, no doubt.
Now, Adam, how do you classify this season for the Nashville Predators, or is it still an incomplete? You want to see how they do in this year's playoff?
I think the fact that they comfortably made the playoff makes this season, in my opinion, a resounding success, which is not something that you would say about most Predators teams recently, because they had higher expectations than just making the playoffs. But when you consider how many people picked against them in preseason picks to make the playoffs, and the fact that they made it in, of course, they had their 18-game point streak, all that. I absolutely think the season is already a success. And, I sat down with Barry Trotz 2 weeks ago, I think it was. It was before the Boston game, for a story I'm writing for Sportsnet.ca, which will be published later this week or over the weekend. And he said to me, as he said on this station as well, that even he had his doubts about what this team could be. It could be anywhere from bad to sneaky good. And the fact that they made the playoffs, and without, you see all you look at what happened last night in the NHL, which was captivating theater with Detroit and Washington and Philadelphia. It was awesome to watch. But the Predators didn't have to worry about that. They were in. It wasn't like they had to, make it on the last day of the season. So to me, anything from this point on should be considered gravy for the Predators. I think the fact that they made the playoffs and they did it somewhat convincingly in the second half of the season when nobody expected them to make the playoffs at all makes this season a success already. Now, starting next season, that might not be the case. Mm-hmm. But this season, I think it is.
Now, we've talked about this time period that the Predators are going to have off, and frankly, we've said it's going to end up being too much time. But then after the first game, it really doesn't matter after that when it's just the initial first game. But there's games still to be played before the season ends. Is this good for the NHL that it's ending this way, that we don't know quite what's what, things are not settled? Because as long as things are not settled, eyes are going to continue to be on the NHL and ultimately what their playoff bracket will be.
Right. When think about last night, as I mentioned, you had a situation where the Capitals, where you had four teams, right? Washington, Willy can correct me. Washington, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and Detroit were all still alive.
Still mathematically alive, yes.
They were still mathematically alive. And you had the Capitals and Flyers playing each other. You had Detroit tie the game with 3 seconds left to force overtime, which eliminated the Flyers, who then pulled their goalie because they needed a win in regulation. They obviously didn't know the results of the Red Wings game. The Capitals score. They make the playoffs also out of nowhere because they were not expected to do much of anything this season either. The fact that these games still mean something, like the Blues play the Stars tonight. The Stars still haven't clinched the Western Conference. Like that makes that game mean something. If tomorrow the Golden Knights and Kings play, not each other. Vegas plays Anaheim, Los Angeles plays Chicago. Third place in the Pacific Division is still unsettled. Like the Knights have a 1-point lead, but the Kings have the tiebreaker if they tie in points. So one of those teams is going to be in the third place spot and play the Oilers. The other team's going to be in the wild card 2 spot and probably will play the Stars. But there's still meaningful hockey to be played on the last day of the season. So the fact that there are still playoff seedings to be figured out, I'm okay with it. Now, if it was 3 days of meaningless games where all the teams had all their spots and we're just running out the string, that would suck. But the fact that they have these games that mean something up until the last day of the season, I'm okay with it. And I think it makes, a game against, under no circumstances would I watch a Golden Knights versus Ducks game on a regular basis. But if I'm still awake at 9 o'clock tomorrow, I may put it on. And that's what the NHL is hoping for.
Okay, quick sidebar. Adam, you used to cover the Capitals before you came to Nashville. Is this the worst Capitals team ever to make the playoffs? Like minus 37 goal difference? Like, how are they there?
It has to be. It has to be. I remember in 2008 it was they needed to win on the last day of the regular season to make the playoffs, and they won the division by winning that game against, I believe it was Florida, on the last day of the regular season to make the playoffs for the first time in the Alex Ovechkin era. But yeah, the goal differential is just ghastly. Part of it is because the teams around them also stink. I mean, the Flyers at one point recently lost 8 games in a row. The Red Wings were up and down. The Penguins had a point streak, but even then they couldn't make it. So some of it has to do with the fact that the teams around them also stink. But, I think a lot of this has to go to goaltending. I mean, Charlie Lindgren came out of nowhere, for the Capitals this year, played exceptionally well, stole the starting job from Darcy Kemper, played back-to-back games. He shut out the Bruins on Monday and then held the Flyers to 1 goal last.
Pretty clutch.
Yeah, that absolutely. So, I think goaltending has played a part of it. It also helps that Alex Ovechkin, found the fountain of youth in the second half of the season. More than halfway through the season, he had 8 goals. And he turned it on in the second half of the season, which absolutely helped. But, I think you have to look at basically, none of those teams Washington, Detroit, Pittsburgh, and Philadelphia. They were all there to take the playoffs, and nobody wanted the spot. I mean, and the Islanders were included in that too until they ultimately figured it out and won third place in the Metro. But I mean, some of it just has to do. I can't remember how long it's been since a team with a worse goal differential made the playoffs. I think it's been like 30 years or something like that since a team that with a negative goal differential of that significance, minus 37, made the playoffs. But you know, the Islanders made the playoffs, I think, with the worst penalty kill in the league. So then that rarely happens. So who knows?
Adam Vingan, appreciate you for stopping by, Adam, and looking forward to having you on every single week throughout the playoffs. So we'll catch up with you next week. Maybe the Predators have played a playoff game. Maybe they haven't. Who knows?
Yeah.
We'll get around to it eventually.
Yeah, at some point.
We'll see if Yanni's booked a surprise concert in Vancouver.
Yanni, U2, Pearl Jam. We got several concert characters this upcoming season. But appreciate you, Adam, and always appreciate your insight.
Thanks, guys.
All right, thanks, Adam. Adam Vingan, he is the very best. So normally he will join us Wednesdays at 1 p.m. We'll talk all things Predators and Stanley Cup playoffs. But I do want to react to what we heard from Adam there because, Willie, you brought up something that Barry Trotz said with Jared yesterday, talking about the importance of having playoff experience. And when you look at these two rosters, the Canucks and the Predators, there's an overwhelmingly more playoff experience on the Predator side of things. How valuable is that? And how valuable is that to Barry Trotz? We'll get into that coming up next. We'll get into your thoughts as well. 615-737-1025 is the phone number. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, we are brought to you by Zen Sports. Start earning cash rewards on your bets today. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older and in Tennessee to bet.
your team shockingly has a lot of playoff experience for a team that we thought was going through a re-something at the beginning of the year. How much do you kind of bank on that playoff experience? How much does that matter to you?
Well, it matters a lot because I think the playoffs is such a different animal, and each game there's no momentum that carries from game to game, and I think experienced players recognize that you got to stay in the moment. You have to understand that it's not going to go your way. You can't have the mindset you're going to grab the puck, go all the way down the ice and score and make something happen every shift. From that standpoint, they have to understand that you have to manage the game correctly. You have to do all those things correctly so that you have great success and stay in the moment. And the team that's the most patient, doesn't mismanage the puck, doesn't, take a selfish penalty or a retaliatory penalty. All that matters. And, from that standpoint, I think that's where the experience factor comes in.
That was Predators general manager Barry Trotz on Stillman & Company yesterday, and we just caught up with Adam Vingan. We'll chat with him every Wednesday throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs. But Barry Trotz saying there, look, having playoff experience, in his perspective, it's invaluable. It's something that the Predators have that the Vancouver Canucks, frankly, do not. Now, of course, we know it's not secure, signed, sealed, delivered that that's the playoff opponent, but it's likely going to be the Predators' playoff opponent.
I think tonight is the game to watch because Dallas is hosting the Blues. They just need a point. Even if they lost in overtime, a point would do it. That would make it signed, sealed, delivered. Crazy things happen. You never know. Like, it's just we're talking about one game for each team. So a Dallas loss and a Vancouver win, and all of a sudden,
Vancouver plays Thursday.
Vancouver plays Thursday against the Jets, a team that kind of like the Predators the other night can't go up or down in the standings. Vancouver now has home ice advantage over the Avalanche, no matter what happens. So they might rest some guys. They might rest more guys than the Predators did. So I think Vancouver's probably going to win that game. I would think, especially if they have to win it, if they know they win and get the 1 seed. Mm-hmm. So the 90% probably isn't really 90%. I would say it's a little lower than that because crazy things happen. Crazy things happen. But tonight we'll know more. But looking at the Canucks roster, and this is another thing that Barry Trotz said with Jared that I thought was interesting. He said there's a lot of similarities when you look at the players. Like, expectations weren't real high for either team. Both have coaches that are going to be in the Jack Adams discussion, probably both on the final ballot. Both have Norris Trophy type of defensemen that should be on the ballot. Quinn Hughes definitely will be. I hope Roman Josi is at least a finalist. Hughes, I think, would win it. You've got, though, a lot of players that on the surface, the name doesn't look that scary, but they've had really good seasons. Like a Colton Sissons, not a huge household name. It's a good, solid player. Same thing with, some guys on the Canucks who they've got a lot of mileage out of. Like, I don't think the casual fan knows much about Connor Garland, but he's a good player. And he's played really well on this team for this coach in this system. So they're more than the sum of their parts. But I think the one advantage that the Predators definitely have is when you look at Ryan McDonough and Luke Schenn and Gus Nyquist and Philip Forsberg and Roman Josi and that group, O'Reilly, they've got a list of guys that have had multiple deep runs on playoff teams. Lots and lots of playoff runs. This Vancouver team lacks that. They don't really have. JT Miller is probably the one guy that you look and Elias Lindholm, who was traded to Vancouver during the season, has got a fair number of playoff games. But when they list the games, just games played for the two teams, it will be very unbalanced in favor of the Predators.
And it does feel like, at least on paper, that's a difference. And that's, I think, part of the reason why Barry Trotz did bring in these quote-unquote serial winners and Gus Nyquist and Ryan O'Reilly. Obviously, first and foremost, it was creating a culture, but it also comes in handy when you're talking about playoff experience. But D-Mase, you've been there. Adam Vingan brought up last segment, maybe it's something that we overstate too much. Maybe it's something that we look into too much. You've been there. You went to the Super Bowl in your rookie season. You went to the playoffs later in your career. How much of a difference is it to have had that playoff experience later in your career versus early in your career rookie season?
I think there's moments where playoff experience can be valuable. You brought up the 99 season. We didn't have guys with much playoff experience on that team. You know, if you're talking about guys that were drafted in 96, 95, they didn't have any playoff experience. You know, the Oilers weren't going to the playoffs. And then we didn't go to the playoffs the prior 2 seasons before ultimately moving into what was then Adelphia's Coliseum. We didn't have much playoff experience. But we didn't know what we didn't know. And we just went out there and we played. We knew we were a good team. So experience can help. But then, you know, lack of experience can help because it helped with us. Again, we didn't know what we didn't know. So we went out there and we just played good football, just solid, good football. Hockey, it's different when you have a series. We were playing one-offs. It's easier to accomplish that in one-offs because you could just be having a great game and you have a bunch of rookies. You see what Houston was able to do, you know.
Got on a roll in that game against the Browns.
Exactly.
Like,
so it can happen, but that's with one-offs. When you have series games like the NHL, like the MLB, like the NBA, that's where experience comes in because you're now playing multiple games. You're tired. You're trying to figure out how do we make adjustments and everything else.
If you go down 2-0.
Absolutely. How do we react from that? A young team, they go down 2-0. They may say, you know what, they just may throw the towel in.
Panic a little bit.
Exactly, panic. But with a veteran team like the Nashville Predators, you don't want to go down 2-0. But if you do, you know you have the leadership and the experience to know what to do, know how to stick together in situations like that. So the experience when you're playing in a series can be more valuable than when we're playing in a one-off. And the NFL is a one-off. It's valuable, but not as valuable. When you're playing a series, I think that's when it becomes valuable.
I think that's a great point. And Barry Trotz said he kind of slipped that line in there that you hear a lot, and that is there's no such thing as momentum from game to game in a series, and that sounds weird, right? Because you're
confidence.
Thinking,
I would say confidence, not because I think momentum masks itself as confidence. It's confidence, or confidence masks itself as momentum. If you have confidence in what you're doing, high confidence, the momentum is going to continue to roll.
Yeah.
So I consider it just confidence in what you're doing.
Yeah.
We're on the roll. It may come off as momentum, but it's really we believe in what we're doing, and we're going out there and we're accomplishing it.
And it's at the same time too. There's that sense by the veteran player who's been through it to know that if you've lost a game, and you could get whipped in a game, but still to have that even keel to say, okay, that was game 2, but game 3, we're going to stay confident and we're going to still be able to come back and win because. Other than the Avalanche a couple of years ago, you rarely just mow through teams round in, round out. You're going to go through in a playoff run some rough moments where you look bad. Like the Predators had the Penguins down and out, it looked like, after they tied the series 2 games apiece, and they're going back to Pittsburgh. You're like, maybe the Penguins are done. They might be worn out. They had the whole run last year. They look weary. Maybe the Predators have them. But they didn't have them, you know, in Game 5. And then, so every game is its own kind of thing. So I understand the concept of there is no momentum, even though if you have it on your side, you definitely want to say, we have the momentum, right? If you have it, you say you got it. If you're the other team, you're saying, oh, there's no such momentum. Next game. We got next game. And a veteran team knows how to work that.
And also, you know, you brought up, if you go down, you know, you lose 2 games in a row. It's also the opposite of if you're up 2 games, not getting overly confident and not thinking,
we got it.
Put
It's
them
over.
away. We got them, no problem. We took care of them. They looked awful in their first couple of games. They've got injuries, whatever it might be. When you've been there before, when you do have that experience, you know that anything can happen in this league. And you know that it is not over until you have won 4 games and you are on to the next. So how much of an advantage is it? I don't know. Is it an overwhelming advantage? Probably not, but it's not nothing. And it's what the Predators have. So you're going to take it, and you're going to try to at least use that to your advantage. Another thing that Barry Trotz brought up as an advantage for them, and it's something that Adam kind of alluded to, advantage for the Predators, that is. Something that Adam alluded to is the pressure aspect of it. Vancouver plays in a Canadian market that is antsy for just any sort of semblance of success. They've gone through a Stanley Cup drought for so long, and they've been miserable for so long, and they want it so bad. Of course we want a Stanley Cup here, but this is a Predators team with a first-year head coach and a first-year general manager that's in the midst of a re-something. The pressure differential is a factor here as well, because I think you would both agree there's not nearly as much pressure on this Predators team as there is on the Canucks team. How much of an advantage is that? Is that an advantage? That I don't know, but it's something that's in the Predators' corner.
I think if you have not seen the media crunch that Vancouver has, it's really a thing, I think. And I don't know what the college football aspect. It's not like Kentucky basketball, because Kentucky basketball has won a lot, or Alabama football. You're under the microscope the same way in Vancouver, but you don't have the credibility of being able to say, well, they have won X amount of championships. That's what Vancouver hasn't had. They got to the Stanley Cup final in Game 7, lost to the Bruins. This was 2011. They beat the Predators in the second round in a really tough series, went all the way to the final and lost, and they had a riot in the city after they lost. It was crazy. And they got known more for that than the fact that they had a great team that almost won the whole thing. So it's really weird, their history. So there's that maybe lack of benefit of the doubt that the media and the fans give them. It's like, oh, they'll blow it, they'll mess it up. You know, there's a lot of that kind of stuff that they have to fight in that city. And at the same time, they're still under the scrutiny that Alabama football or Kentucky basketball or Tennessee football is under. So I do think that adds to some pressure. Now, Rick Tocchet, the coach, is really good at working that. Like, your coach has to know how to work the media in that environment, and he does a really good job. I think he takes pressure off of his team with that. But I think it'll be there for the playoffs, more so than it will be on the Predators, who I think Barry Trotz has done the job from day one just by setting the expectation low. Like, I don't know what we're going to see. We could be sneaky good. Hey, they are sneaky good, but hey, we're in the playoffs. Nobody thought we'd be here. No pressure on us. The pressure's on them.
Barry knows what he's doing when he's saying that.
Yes.
I also think he knew what he was doing when he sent a little bit of a message, not to the team, but to the league. And we'll get into that coming up next. And, of course, your thoughts as well. 615-737-1025 is the phone number if you want to get in on the conversation. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase score big this spring with Lee Company and the Nashville Predators in the 10K Power Play giveaway. Enter for a chance to win a Kohler home generator or $10,000 toward Lee Company Home Services. That's right, a Kohler home generator or $10,000 toward Lee Company Home Services. So go online to leecompany.com/giveaway to enter. That's leecompany.com/giveaway in the 10K Power Play giveaway. Contest entries are accepted until Saturday, April 20th. Lee Company, all you need.
as a former coach and now a general manager, somebody who's in charge, that by caring about this, you would be allowing other people to care about something that is beyond both their and your control?
Well, I think I would prefer if we started sooner. I just think when you get away from the game, the intensity of the game, all that, for too long, it takes you a while to ramp it up. And in a best-of-7 series, if you can't ramp it up pretty early, you could be packing your bags and going home. So I would prefer a Sunday start if possible, but I'll let the league decide that. That's the number one thing that matters to me. And just once we get the schedule, we'll adapt to it. But I will tell you this today: it is a good day for our group to relax and maybe reflect and maybe even celebrate a little bit today on with our wives and our families, and then tomorrow will be probably a really intense practice, and we'll try to see as soon as we can to when we get our schedule, and we will work from from the back to the front of our schedule in a way that will help us prepare for the playoffs.
That was Barry Trotz on Stillman and Company yesterday, and we always joke, OBB, open book Barry, like if he feels a certain way, he's going to let you know. Maybe when it comes to league business, he's not going to be so open, so candid as he is maybe about Predators business. But just listening to Barry, not only in that clip, but in several things that he talked about in terms of playoff scheduling, you could tell that, one, he didn't want to be overly pushy, but two, he wanted his message to be heard. And it sounded like, to me, Barry Trotz was awfully frustrated with the idea of the playoffs not starting until Tuesday and a potential back-to-back from Vancouver to Nashville with that's a 5-hour flight and a 3-hour time change.
Depending on the wind, it can stretch. If you're going against the wind, it's an extra hour, and it's already probably 4.5 minimum. And I've been on flights where it's taken quite a bit longer than that.
And after you
most of the time going out there.
After you've just played an aggressive hockey game and you're on your way to play another one potentially the very next day, no way.
Yeah, and so I could tell in his voice and listening to the full interview, and Jared asked him about what we've talked about a little bit with the Pearl Jam concert and the JT concert and 21 Savage and all this. He said, yeah, they have some concert dates booked in some tricky dates that are going to make it hard to flow. In the ideal situation, it's you play every other day. That's how a 7-game series should work.
Yeah.
But concerts are booked. In some markets, you have an NBA team in the playoffs along with an NHL team. That complicates things. And sometimes TV wants certain matchups in certain time windows, so that can complicate things. But I do feel like there's probably some lobbying going on because as we sit here right now, we don't know that the Predators are going to play the Canucks. It's just more than likely. So it could flip, and then this doesn't even come into play. But whoever plays the Canucks is probably eyeing that. The other, L.A., Vegas are in that conversation too. They're probably making contingencies. I know that there are traveling people that are coordinated. When would we fly? When would we get there? What hotel will we stay at? That's a very important part of the mix, and you don't want there to be any hiccups. So there's a ton of talking going on behind the scenes. But what he said that really jumped out to me, he said, if you can't ramp up early in a 7-game series, it might be too late. And so if you're rusty in game 1, hey, we're rusty in game 1, we're fine in game 2. That you might be too late. That game could cost you the series.
I mean, you only get maximum 7 cracks at it.
Yeah,
7 if you're lucky. I mean, if you need to take 2 games to get ramped up, then, like you said, you're done.
Well, you better take a period. That's all you need.
Yeah,
get a period to ramp back up. But the more I think about it, and again, if this was a one-off, then I would be really worried about the long rest because as we've seen in NFL games where the team that has the most rest, it takes them a while to get going typically, especially if they have one of those matchups in the first round where, either that team, it's a closely contested team based upon personnel, or that team just had your number for the longest. One-offs is typically it's a little bit different. But when you're playing a series, I think it can be beneficial for you to have that rest because a team that's just coming off of playing a game, say a 2 or 3 day rest, they may be rested, but they're really not because they're still, from a mental standpoint, they're getting in that playoff mode, whereas the Predators have been rested for 3 or 4 days, and then they can sort of systematically within those days ramp it back up to a point where now we're ready to go. First game, we're not worried about it. Well, the team that didn't have as much rest, sometimes, especially early in the game, you may see the difference in those two teams. One may be faster than the other.
And how much is too much?
Yeah.
We've all been on long vacations before. First day back, not always your sharpest. And I know this is easy for me to say because I have, zero, skins on the wall. It's nothing off my back. But what's stopping Barry Trotz from saying screw Pearl Jam? Screw Justin Timberlake. I'm sorry. I'm not going to let your scheduling snafus get in the way of me and my team.
Well, that's where the NHL steps in. I mean, Barry's not going to say anything. He's not going to say too much to ruffle any feathers, but you understand.
It's a conversation that has to be had, though.
But you understand that, this isn't advantageous for his team, nor is it advantageous for Vancouver as well. And he just would like for it to be more of a even playing ground for both teams in regards to when they start, travel, and all this other stuff. So he's not going to say too much, but I'm sure, just like Nashville, Vancouver is thinking the same thing. Seriously, y'all had these games scheduled in here, these concerts scheduled in here, and y'all knew more than likely, or there was a high chance we would make the playoffs. Exactly.
You didn't think you had a chance to make the playoffs?
What are y'all saying about us? Seriously?
Mind games.
Yeah, so I'm sure Vancouver, whoever if it turns out they played Nashville, I'm sure they will be just as upset as the Nashville Predators. The only good part about it for them, they're at home.
Max Hurst has been texting. One piece of really good news is Todd Richards, who had a medical procedure. It was away for the team the last couple of weeks of the regular season, is back with the team. So great to see Richie, just one of the nicest guys you'll meet. A good, easygoing guy who is easy to talk to off, kind of away from the rink. I think he's been a good influence on the young defenseman. He calls out the defense pairs during the game, so it'll be good to have him back in that role.
Absolutely.
Philip Forsberg didn't practice today, which is nothing new. This is just what they've been doing. But the practice, according to Max, was, as you would expect, pretty up-tempo, rigorous, trying to stay sharp. Barry Trotz went through some good detail, open book Barry, with Jared yesterday about some of the little things that you might see at practice the next couple of days just to try to keep that game edge as best you can in not a game situation.
The other difficult thing is it might be easier for Andrew Brunette to plan out the rigor of the schedule if he knew when they were playing.
I know.
We still don't know what they're playing.
And you're not going
to know until, Friday?
Well, you could know who you're going to play at the end of tonight.
But you don't know
when.
You
don't know when.
And so behind the scenes, I'm wondering if they'll know after tonight.
Maybe so.
I would hope that you have a pretty good idea, whether it's Sunday or Tuesday, whatever, because, it's like Barry Trotz said 2 or 3 times in the interview with Jared, when we get our schedule.
Yeah, when we know.
Yeah.
Because
when we know, you will know.
If the Blues win tonight in regulation, then you have to wait and see what happens in the game between the Canucks and the Jets the following night before you could possibly know.
And in the meantime,
that's a whole nother night.
Andrew Brunette is thinking, okay, our practice level at this point is going to be, at a 10, and then tomorrow it's going to be a rest day, and then we're back at a 6. I think this would all just be solved if every team ended within 48 hours of one another.
I feel like they used to do that. I used to be more like that. I guess with
4 days
Seattle being in the league complicates things, I guess.
But that
is really weird.
Super weird.
Yeah, blame it on
Very
Seattle.
inconvenient. I don't like it when it inconveniences me. But all right, Jonathan Hutt will join us coming up next. A week from tomorrow, the NFL draft is going down in Detroit. We'll get Hutton's thoughts on what we talked about in Nick Suss's most recent article in the Tennessee. And Nick Suss says, hey, I think the Titans could trade back as far as 13 and still get Joe Alt. We'll get Hutton's reaction to that, and we'll get Hutton's thoughts as we are now just 1 week away from the NFL draft. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase. Tune in to 94.9 The Fan today as the Nashville Sounds take on the Omaha Storm Chasers at First Horizon Park. Pre-game at 6:20, first pitch at 6:35 p.m., with coverage also available on 94.9 The Fan app and at 949thefan.com. Sounds baseball on 94.9 The Fan, presented by Twin Peaks, Family Leisure, and Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning.
All right, let's tell you about League Company. Speaking of baseball, how about Mookie Betts 5 for 5 last night? Shout out, Overton High School product. He is doing some amazing things. As you'd expect, don't take it for granted, though. He just keeps going. Meanwhile, League Company, back to the hockey side, we've been talking about them. When the playoffs start, and hopefully sooner than later you'll have the dates and everything, we'll have great coverage of the playoffs here on 102.5 The Game, and League Company is going to be a big part of it. They have sponsored the Predators for a long time, very supportive of that team. And they have a great program for you when it comes to a lot of aspects of your house. Home improvement project, who builds it, how do you go about it? They've got that in their department at League Company. General maintenance at home or at work, they've got that department in their program. And, of course, the overall upkeep of your house with your air conditioning unit, your plumbing, your electric, and your heating. That is a huge bread and butter for them. 615-567-1000. Ask about their home maintenance plan. It's awesome. 615-567-1000 or go to leaguecompany.com. That's League Company, proud sponsor, Nashville Predators.
Look at the time. Look at the time.
Look at the time. It is Hutton O'Clock. Hutton O'Clock on Caroline, Willy, D-Mase. We're broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing and Heating and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Jonathan Hutton joining us a little bit later than usual this week. Jonathan Hutton from Hot Mic with Hutton and Withrow. Hut, always appreciate you stopping by. We're just over a week away from the NFL draft. Finally. We're almost there, except I'm here for a few more days of gossip and tea and lies and rumors, but after another week, I think I'll be ready for just action, finally.
I'm still waiting to hear back from the commissioner on having the first round Thursday, just since we have this little dead period between we might as well fill it with something exciting like the draft.
Between the Stanley Cup playoffs
so
and
let's
the draft.
just go ahead and get it in. Let's look at the bright side. Let's use our resources and slide the draft in, and then we can start round one for the Preds. Because it's all about me.
You want to get it? Oh, I see what you're saying. Because your schedule,
yes,
Willy,
about
My
Yeah.
schedule. It's about my schedule, Hut. So I have called the commissioner's office, and I'm waiting to hear back.
Roger would understand.
I will back you
I
on this.
left a message.
I'm all for it. But you could also reduce the amount of time in between picks. Like the draft will start at 7:00. We will not have the Chicago Bears on the clock until 7:15. That's ridiculous.
At the absolute
Move this along.
earliest.
Get Caleb
They
Williams.
waste
on
so
the
much time at that thing. It's unbelievable.
At the absolute earliest.
Got to get Kuiper on TV.
You know what? Mel deserves his airtime. I'll give that to Mel.
Did you say airtime or hair time?
Both.
Both. What a style that Mel Kiper. Who, by the way, just side note, Hope Hines put Mel Kiper on TV for the first time
Wow.
in Baltimore.
Is that right? I didn't
Yes.
know that.
He went down. He heard about this kid. Hope tells it better. I shouldn't tell the story. Let him tell it. But Hope found out about this kid in Baltimore who had all these tapes on prospects as like a hobby, and went to his basement and did a story on him. And it was Mel Kiper Jr. How crazy is that?
That's awesome.
Humble beginnings, even for
Yes.
Mel Kiper.
It's a great story in his book, In Hindsight, by the way. Available now on bookstores near you.
Hashtag not sponsored. All right.
I give free plugs to Hope Hines any day.
He deserves it. Both Hope Hines and Mel Kiper deserve all the free plugs. But we've been breaking down, it feels like every single possible angle and approach that the Titans could take to the first round of the draft. And I'm sure that you've been doing the same thing. Between these possible scenarios, let's say at 7, Joe Alt is not there. Do you take the best player available? Do you take the best tackle available? Or do you trade back and hope that there is one, a trade partner, and 2, that if you do trade back, that there's going to be a game-changing player for you available at that spot?
I'm trading back because in this scenario, if you have Alt available, and who else did you say is not available? Who else did you say was drafted? Why? So in this scenario, Caroline, Alt has been drafted, I'm assuming, by the Chargers.
Yes.
That
Which
means
would
Marvin
in
Harrison
theory-
Jr. could have been drafted. I mean, there's going to be a quarterback on the board at 7 for a team to trade up with. Quarterbacks on the board that a team's going to try to jump and make sure they draft. I'm trading back. I'm setting up my team with future first-round picks, and I'm getting more draft capital now for this draft because the Titans don't have much of it. And, I mean, you're allowed to hit on picks in the top 100 and beyond, not just at pick number 7. So, yeah, I'm trading back, gathering more picks, and bringing more talent to the roster that, oh, by the way, still is not that deep.
I'm glad you bring up quarterback potentially on the board at 7, because this is something that I talked about this morning when I was on with Robbie and Joe. And
No, I'm
something
not drafting.
that
I'm not
Jared's been
drafting
talking about.
quarterback.
You're not taking a quarterback?
No.
What
No,
if it's
I'm not.
What if it's Drake May?
Who do you love? I loved a lot of these guys last August. I don't even like Caleb Williams all that much.
I don't think
quite
I
frankly.
do either.
And I'm surprised that I'm not buying the hype as much with this quarterback class, because I bought the hype in 2021. It was a terrible NFL career for a lot of those guys. 2022, I think one quarterback has been to the playoffs, or was that 2021 with Trevor Lawrence? Either way, maybe this is a Hall of Fame career for 4 of them, of the 5 that could be drafted first round, maybe 6. I don't know if I'm buying the hype that much, but point being, I don't like any of these guys more than And I'm assuming Caleb Williams is off the board. Maybe Jaden Daniels, but build around Will Levis and get him some talent.
Why does that question keep coming up?
Don't treat him like Justin Fields. Don't treat him like Justin Fields in Chicago.
Yeah, but why does what if the guy's sitting there at 7? There's no chance that's going to happen, is there?
I mean, there is a possibility.
Of a Drake May. I'm saying Drake May. He's not going to 7.
You never. It's not necessarily.
I didn't think Will Levis was going to be available at 33
I didn't think he was going to be available at 32 either, but he was. I mean, in the second round.
Right.
But I think some of it is you just don't know how, and this is what we've continued to talk about at least the last couple of weeks, is where is it in the draft, because it happens every year, just about every year. Where is it in the draft where that one move alters everything? This year, it could be in the top 4 or 5 that this team moves up, this team moves back. Now it alters everything. And maybe it's not Drake May. Maybe some other quarterback falls. Maybe it's Jaden Daniels that falls further down. If he's there for the Titans to take, then do you take him? I'm not sure. I would be hard pressed to not take him, but I would, if he's there and I'm there at 7, I'm moving out of that pick. I gotta trust that our evaluation of Will Levis was right, and we're gonna give him an opportunity to solidify himself as the franchise quarterback. All we need to do is help him. Helping him means surrounding him with individuals.
I mean, the general manager was here when they drafted him. Mm-hmm. Not just Brian Callahan, right? Callahan wasn't. But point being, there's someone vouching for him. And let me also say, Drake May, perception. I can't stop thinking about this. He was going into the season the number 2 quarterback, and at times people were saying that he could be the number 1 overall pick. Okay, and I get it. Will Levis was hyped too. At North Carolina, in that conference, Willie, I don't know if you'll roll your eyes at this or not. They back-to-back years with Drake May, they fell off a cliff in November. Like I won't say they quit, but they went from being like unbeaten to not winning. And if you're that great, I mean, let's put up some points and go win the game. Caleb Williams didn't have a defense, but he put up numbers. I like Drake May. I like the alpha qualities of what he's saying. I just don't like the perception I have of what he should have been accomplishing at North Carolina. We had the same question about Will Levis, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know how to differentiate the two, quite frankly, if it's between those two. And at the shakeup in the draft, Mace, we know Washington's taking a quarterback. Why are the Patriots so silent right now? Mm-hmm. That's also a spot where maybe they want to load up on picks with a new head coach and general manager. Because they're not in love with the 3rd best quarterback unless it's Jaden Daniels. You see what I'm saying? Like, that could be the big stunner is Arizona thinks they're going to get a haul, and it ends up being a team ahead of them that we haven't really considered because it's not the quarterback that the Patriots would have drafted. The assumption that 1, 2, 3, regardless of the order of 2 and 3, just going to take the quarterback there. To me, if I'm evaluating, I want one of the other 2 and not just necessarily who's left for the picking. But I mean, again, I want to build through high picks instead of just putting everything on one rookie quarterback that we're not really sure, flip of the coin, who's going to work out and who doesn't.
We'll talk with Jonathan Hutton discussing the Tennessee Titans and their and the NFL's upcoming draft. Now, Jonathan, I was reading an article the other day, and the article was saying which teams in the NFL needs to get their draft right. And it had 6 teams that needed to get it right. And I was surprised that I didn't see the Tennessee Titans amongst the 6 teams. But I asked you the question, is the Titans one of these teams that needs to get it right this year in regards to their draft?
So this is you can't see the forest because you're in the trees, right? Okay. Yes, because they have missed on previous drafts. Now we've seen some good things of the recent rookie class, good things of the some of the late round picks recent, but they have whiffed. I mean, Jeffrey Simmons is one of the few first round picks that they actually extend within this franchise. yeah, they need to get it right. This is a critical building block for this new era, this updated version of what Titans football is going to look like. And they have the 7th pick. They have a top 10 pick. Absolutely, they need to get this right. But I think the 30,000-foot view of the league is, what's the coach need to do? What's the general manager need to do? Because they've now been around the organization for 3 or 4 years. Were the Giants on that list?
Yeah, the Giants was on that list. It was the
Joe
Giants,
Shane,
and
and Brian Daboll.
Dallas.
This is their 3rd draft. This is their
course
3rd draft.
Dallas
They have a
was
high
on
pick.
there.
Yeah, because Dallas doesn't do anything in free
New
agency.
England on there too.
I think Denver was on there. There was
Denver,
16.
quarterback
Denver
move.
makes
I
sense.
need
Yeah.
to go back and
They've got to get it right. So I agree with all of those, but it's the perception of who's in power and how hot the seat is. Or you got rid of Russell Wilson, so okay, let's see what you got in Denver and who you're going after, because it's not going to be just one quarterback without any backups or the starter as it is right now. Anyway, the Titans need to get it right, because they haven't been hitting many base hits even in the draft high.
The teams were
they need to go with the scouting staff and everything that's been in place, and some of the guys that are familiar faces. They need to go and not just hit a single. They need a double, triple, home run, because they don't have many picks, and they need to take advantage of the ones they have in the first, second round right now.
Yeah, you're right. They need singles and doubles, because I think the home run ultimately is your quarterback, and you hope if you hit singles and doubles, you're setting him up to be the home run, home run hitter or the home run swing. But the teams were Chicago. There was 5. Excuse me. Teams were Chicago, the Giants, Minnesota, Dallas, and Carolina. So those were the 5 teams that in this article that they had to get it right. They have to get it right this upcoming draft. And I'm looking at the Titans and I'm thinking, well, the Titans should be one of these teams that, considering what they have not done in recent years, considering where they're going to be, or ultimately where they want to be, opening up this stadium in 3 years. I've always said everything they do from last year, from this year on, is setting them up for going to that new stadium. I've always said that, and I believe it. They want to have a Super Bowl team about time they hit 2027 and going into that new stadium.
Well, and that'll be the final year of, hypothetically here, of Levis's rookie contract, 5th year they could use. Again, take advantage of a rookie contract and have a rookie left tackle or wide receiver under contract for that same distance, right? That to me would be the goal. If you're staying at 7, you're helping out everything with your offense. And what is an offensive draft? So that's the other thing we don't know, is how many offensive players are graded as a true first-round pick for them on a week from tomorrow, because this is a totally different outlook on what they are targeting. Even at tackle, what's the quality of left tackle that they must have for Bill Callahan's offensive line? Do they want more of a finesse player, or do they want that grit that would fit certainly what Mike Vrabel and John Robinson would have drafted?
This is a hypothetical I threw at the gang earlier in the show, and in the whole eye of a little more of a long-term view. If you thought, you just got done saying, what does the board look like? How good is the tackle? You definitely need the tackle, but where does he grade based on great tackles that have come out before? So if the scenario was you end up in this draft without the tackle, but you draft instead somebody you think is a game changer, is that something you'd be willing to do and take the heat of everybody saying, how could you not draft a tackle?
Yes. I mean, you're saying the game changer? To me, that's what they have to get.
Yes.
Right? So
rather than need.
Game changer to me is either on the defensive front, which is still thin, by the way, and I would say ahead of that, someone who scores touchdowns. Brian Callahan has mentioned that. They want someone that can score the football. That would be wide receiver in this draft. Or Brock Bowers in this draft, right? Like that's what I'm thinking of when you say game changer. They have those guys. They don't have enough. So if Joe Alt is Joe Thomas, you draft him. If he's not, and you've got a game changer, I'm drafting the game changer.
Okay, the other part that we discussed this week is over the long haul, there have been some studies that have put out there that shows that trading down, it may not help you every time you do it, but over time, the percentages are the more you trade down, you have better success because you're ending up with more picks. And the variance between, say, the 7th player picked and the 13th player picked in a given year, over the long term, isn't that big of a difference. So
as long as you take best available player instead of need.
And that's a variable that I don't know is considered when you do all these studies, right? But if you believe in that, how much are you, quote unquote, looking to trade down based on that principle and the fact that they lack picks? They could really use a few more picks.
I'm only trading down, Willie, if it's a quarterback that a team is chasing, because that is the premium price tag that you can ask for. If it's any other position, I don't think you're not going to get the same type of return, whatever those future picks may look like, and the current picks that would be needed right now. So, I'm only doing it for quarterback in this draft because again, the goal would be you don't have many more top 10 picks. So go get if picks 7 through 13 or 13 through 32 are virtually the same type of player, make sure you get the best of the guys that are rated about 7 through 13. And it doesn't have to be a position of need if it's truly the description we just said, the game-changing type talent. I'm drafting that player. Now it goes back to quarterback. They should have that type of player with resources around him already. And the jury's still out on Levis, but I haven't heard anything either on the record or off the record that leads me to believe that they're not happy with the way he's been treating the offseason. So, and the way that they want to go through the pass, right? They want to air it out. He can certainly do that.
Jonathan Hutton is with us. Hut, last one from me. I could ask you all day long, what about this player at 7? What about this player at 7? Like, we could do that all day long. But I'll ask you about this player because I do think that he is such a unique prospect. What about Brock Bowers at 7?
I love Brock Bowers, but it's biased because I've watched him half the time on CBS's national game at 2:30. Watched him blow out a lot of opponents, right? I love the aspect that he got hurt and came back to play. He's already won a national championship. I'm looking at the mentality of the average athlete today, not the mentality of Willy Donick at Vandy, okay? Where he's playing. He's coming back. I think Brock Bowers has an old school approach to that. Came back and played after the injury and knew he was going to be a high pick, knew that he was risking whatever it was to come back and play. Guys are opting out of bowl games. Brock Bowers is playing in bowl games, even after he's got a situation where they go from number 1 to not in the college football playoff. So yeah, I appreciate that, and that factors into the type of player I would be looking for. There are other players like that, but he stands out because again, I was watching him on a regular basis, and he produced. He was available, and this was as a sophomore. The scouts were saying that he would be a top 5 pick if he entered the draft as a sophomore, if he was allowed.
That's insane.
I don't know why things have quieted down on him. I realize that you don't want to draft a tight end as high because the market, it's kind of like running back. If you tag a tight end, it's not as expensive as the top players on your offense. I get why you don't want to make a rookie one of the top paid players at his position. But I mean, if we're just looking and grading based on what we've seen at the college level, which is what they do, he's the type of player that would be high on the board, and he will be. And you know what? He's the type of player that will be not talked about now. He will be described as a steal Thursday night, and he's going to go to a Super Bowl contender. He'll fall that, and you'll see a team go after him that will truly enhance the offense and another layer that they can add to a good quarterback. He'll benefit from that, and he'll help a team win.
There really has been so little buzz about Brock Bowers, and I think it is because he plays the tight end position, that everyone is afraid of the T and the E next to his name rather than the fact that he's not really just a tight end. He's just a weapon.
He's the type of player to me, Caroline, that it's really this is the extreme example, but the Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce rapport. He's the type of player that I think builds that within your locker room. Not saying it happens overnight, but I don't view him as like some, video game guy who's racing home at 5 o'clock to do that. The 9 to 5 quarterback, as I believe Fisher described Vince Young. He's got some ball player in him that you need, and I appreciate the fact that again, he's playing for his team and trying to win instead of getting ready for the next level or the next week. That's important, especially down the stretch of a season where guys can slow roll an injury return for an extra week trying to get the bye week.
Hutton, you're the best as always. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll catch up with you next week.
Yep, always enjoy the show. I was listening earlier, and keep up the great work.
Appreciate it, Hut. Jonathan Hutton, Hot Mike with Hutton and Withrow. We'll get right into your phones on this coming up next because we've got loaded phones, reaction to what Hutton had to say, reaction to draft talk. So we are right to you on the other side. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase. We're brought to you by Zen Sports. Start earning cash rewards on your bets today. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older and in Tennessee to bet.
Is there a team that you're eyeballing for your future in the NFL? I know you can't control it, but if you could, where would you want to go?
Whoever wants to take me. I mean, it's hard to say. I'd love to go to.
He wants the Niners to get rid of Kittle, and then he wants to go to the 49ers.
I'd be all right.
Let him say it.
I'd be all right with going to the Tennessee Titans. I mean, I liked it down in the Georgia, Tennessee area.
Yeah,
I mean, I thought it was cool, but yeah, that'd be a cool spot to
Yeah,
be.
you hear that, Titans?
It's a good
you hear
spot.
that, Titans? Get ready,
I played in
Titans.
Tennessee for 2 years. It's a great football town. It's only getting better. So I hear you there. It's a great place to live, too.
Yeah.
That'd be cool to do.
I just love that clip. It makes me laugh every single time. Less because of what he actually said, but more because of the subsequent mania across all of Titans fans that, oh my gosh, Brock Bowers is going to be a Titan because he likes the Southeast. Like, calm down, everybody. If Brock Bowers is drafted by the Tennessee Titans, it's not because he said he wanted to be drafted by the Tennessee Titans. I think a lot of 22-year-olds like to be millionaires in the city of Nashville. But promise your phones and we are right to your phones. Our phone lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. 615-737-1025 is the phone number. If you want to get in on the conversation, and everything is on the table. We're talking draft. We're talking Predators in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Andrew Texan says, this sounds silly but simple. Alt is good to really good. Neighbors is great to elite. How do you get great taking really good players over elite players? Corey Davis 2.0. I think that might be assuming far too many things. I think you're just assuming that Alt is good and Neighbors is elite. You're also assuming that Neighbors or Alt is going to be there for you at 7, which neither is a guarantee. I think that Neighbors has the makings of being an elite wide receiver in the National Football League. I also think Joe Alt has the makings of being an elite left tackle in the league.
It just depends on what you feel your team needs more, and not necessarily, based from like actual need. Like they actually need literally need a left tackle. So, okay, you can go with that direction. Or you can say our need is we want to be more explosive as an offense. We got players that we believe can be explosive, but we want to add another dynamic into it.
We don't need exactly. Scores.
We don't. It's not like it's a like dire need to have one more, say, skilled player, but we can use it, So I don't know.
On the list of priorities
it's just,
and dire needs, I would say left tackle is the highest on the list of quote-unquote needs. Receiver's still on there.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that the Titans are just done with receiver and that box is checked and you can throw it in the trash can and not have to worry about it. But you at least have two pieces that you feel really encouraged about this season.
So, the Titans, I've thought about this because I'm looking at D-Hop, and D-Hop's what, 31 years old?
31.
Will he turn 32 during the season? Or he's like his birthday, he beat 31 during the season.
I'm not sure.
But the more and more I think about it, I sort of look at his career.
He'll be 32 going into the season.
Okay, so but even with that, I look at his career and what he's still able to do, and I sort of look at my career and what I was able to do in my 30s. It's just not a foregone conclusion like this is D-Hop's last year. It's not me here in Nashville. I know it's not his last year playing, but it's not a foregone conclusion that it's his last year here in Nashville. Because to me, it all depends on whether he plays good football this year. If he plays good football this year, they are not segueing away from him. They're going to keep him here on this roster. They're going to try to sign, I believe they're going to try to sign another deal, a 2-year deal, 3-year deal that's really a 2, or a 2-year deal that really a 1, but they can max it out to 2. Because to me, that puts them out of the market for a receiver in the first round or the second round in this year's draft or next year's draft, because they keep D-Hop on the roster. He's still playing good football. You assume Calvin Ridley is going to play good football, and now you need your third guy. If Traylon hits, then I don't need to look for a wide receiver really this year or next year. That's an if. But if he does hit, and when I mean hit, I'm not talking about hitting and he needs to be a 1,000-yard, 1,100-yard, 1,200-yard guy. Hitting for him right now at this stage, 800 yards, 6 touchdowns. If you can give me that 700 yards, 6 or 7 touchdowns, you give me that, that's hitting, because now that's added on to our number 1 receiver and our number 2 receiver. So to me, it's not a foregone conclusion that D-Hop will be gone. So that puts me in a place where I don't need to draft a receiver in the first round. This year, I'm not going to do it. Next year, I'm not going to have to do it, because now we got a core stable of receivers, and we could bring another veteran guy. So to me, I'm good at receiver. Now, what else do I need? A left tackle, and I need an inside backer. Those are the 2 biggest needs for the Tennessee Titans right now. It's not wide receiver.
And you're not going to take an inside backer.
They're not going to take. Yeah, they're not. Yeah, I'm saying as far as need, like in the draft, they could draft one in the second round. To me, it's not a bigger receiver. Is not a big need for them at this point in time. They need to shore up everything else before they think about another pass catcher, at least to me.
As far as receiver is concerned, though, I'll go back to what you said when the Titans originally acquired D-Hop. He doesn't make your offense explosive.
He doesn't, but with Calvin Ridley along.
And Calvin Ridley's also 29. He's not a spring chicken.
It's not about the age. The age is not a factor right now. It's not.
But when you're looking ahead for the future.
29 to 32, it's not a factor. It's really not, especially in today's football, the way these guys train. If they haven't had major injuries, 29 and 32, I'm not worried about the player from that, because to me, I still believe he still has a lot left in him. I am only talking about it based on what I was able to do and what I've seen in this league, especially now. 32, it's like when you're into your early 30s, that's not the cutoff date for receivers anymore.
I also feel like you were maybe more of an exception than a rule. You had a long career. You were able to stay healthy.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
I look at Julio. The Titans acquired Julio when he was, 31, 32?
Yeah, but he's had some. D-Hop has had one injury that has put him out considerable amount of games. Calvin Ridley, I don't think he's had an injury. He was dealing with the mental aspect of himself, so he left the games. He hadn't had any major injuries. What I'm saying is this: I look at the Tennessee Titans from a 1 and a 2. They're good for the next 2 years if they choose to sign D-Hop back another year, which I think they will. They're good for this year and next year. I believe they're good. Traylon comes on. They're good for this year, next year, and the year after that. Because now he said, well, I don't need to go out and get a number 1 pass catcher, at least for the next 2 years. Hopefully, if Traylon kicks next 3 years, I don't need to touch the wide receiver in the first 2 rounds. Maybe I could, but it's not a dire need. My dire needs are tackle, inside linebacker, and maybe another cornerback, because those 2 guys are getting a little bit older too. So to me, pass catcher is not a priority anymore. Do I need more? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Is it a priority like it once was? No, it's not.
I love you. Mm-hmm. I think you're crazy.
Nah, you just got to look at the way the game's going. This team,
I just think you're looking too much into what we don't know for certain. What we don't know for certain if D-Hop is going to have a good enough year to sign him back.
He will. He will. Barring injury,
I
he will.
don't know if Traylon Burks is going to do anything worthwhile this season.
That's the question mark.
I cannot put any eggs into that basket. I have to continue to build my team.
Oh, you're going to continue to build your team. What I'm saying is
I can't put Traylon Burks into consideration for that.
You have to he's always in consideration. As long as he's on this roster.
He's giving me no reason to keep him in
As long as he's on this roster, you got to consider him. Because he hasn't been a complete failure. You look at him and you say, now, the question is, like you said last week, whether he wants it or not. Mm-hmm. That's a separate question. But he's shown that he can be a playmaker in this league. If indeed he hits. Now, if he hits, you don't have to worry about it. But he's the only question mark in this offense. I am telling y'all right now, D-Hop will have another good season, and the Titans will re-sign him.
For how much?
They will.
Because that's part of it, too.
It'll be a 2-year deal, and he'll make –
it's not going to be a lot.
He'll make anywhere from in between 10 and 12 per, which they can get out. The average would be around 10 to 12, but you know how they finagle the money.
Yeah.
To me, they will sign him back to another deal because he will have enough. He will have a good enough season. They will look to sign him to another deal. Let me say that because he can do what he wants after that. But they will look to sign another deal if he has another year. If he has a good year, the quarterback has a good year, he will re-sign back here. The question mark is and always will be, at least this year, Traylon Burks. I think they got their 2 receivers for at least the next 2 to 3 years if they choose to sign D-Hop back, which I think they will.
What do you think?
So I don't think they need a dire. It's dire that they need a pass catcher when you talk about Brock Bowers too.
I understand all that. This is all the things that we talk about every year, but that's what would be compelling to me is if you're sitting at 7 and the guy just on your board, regardless of need, is one of those receivers that you think is really special. That to me is a tough decision.
Yeah. But because if you get outside of that,
because I agree with you you wouldn't have signed Ridley, right? If you didn't think, okay, that's going to cover a big need. Like you would invest that kind of money if you didn't think there was room for Ridley and for D-Hop and said, okay, now we've got a good foundation for our quarterback to throw to. Like you couldn't be sitting there going, now we're going to go draft the wide receiver in number 7. But if that guy's there and you're like, man, this guy grades out better than anything that's on the board, that would be a tough call. Even though it's not a priority, would you do it if you're just saying to yourself, this is the best player, he's going to make a difference, I'll figure out the other stuff?
I mean,
it's just a tough
situation.
Tough dilemma that teams find themselves in drafts.
Because I think above all else, the Titans need great players at whatever position that might be. Whether that's left tackle, whether that's receiver, tight end, inside linebacker, safety, they need just great players. We'll get right back into your phones on this coming up next. I know we blabbered, we didn't get enough of you, so we're right to you coming up next. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, 1025, 1063 The Game.
I'm looking at, and I'm looking at what Ozzie did. It's the same thing that the Tennessee Titans are trying to do.
Okay, let's talk Loan Pronto. We've got the brand new Loan Pronto deal that they've got going, and it's not really anything that you don't know about if you've been hearing me talk about Loan Pronto now for a long period of time. It's the same principle. Like if I just told you, do you want to save about $850 a month on average in your monthly budget? I would think you would sign up for that. Unless your next question would be, well, what do I have to do? Well, this is the beauty about with Loan Pronto. You can get the money that you need to do and the Express Equity line of credit in a quick period of amount of time. It's absolutely worth the time it takes to do this, because then you're going to start saving that kind of money each month. Because what you're going to do is you're going to take the money you get, you're going to knock out that credit card bill, you're going to knock out that car loan that has the higher interest rate. And so it's a great system that I would recommend with Loan Pronto. It's an outstanding program, the Express Equity line of credit. Call right now if you're a homeowner and your home's value is up and you're looking for better financial solutions. If you're swimming in some credit card debt or that car loan, you're like, well, I need something better. This is the way to go. Call Loan Pronto, 615-499-5780. Ask about the Express Equity line of credit. On average, their homeowner saves $850 a month per month doing this. 615-499-5780 or loanpronto.com. NMLS 1661781, subject to lender approval, equal housing lender.
Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, promise your phone, so right to your phones we will go. Phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. We're right into your phones. Hunter is on the line with a thought on the Tennessee Titans. Go ahead, Hunter.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for a great show. I am wondering about I'm thinking we should consider Bowers for the tight end because he is a game changer. I agree with Derek about, you've got to sort of leave it open for Traylon to work out. And if you can get Bill Callahan to sign off on some of the, on a later draft pick for the tackles, I think we'd be in good shape.
Yeah, thanks for your call, Hunter. Good call. That is one thing that I think about is when we approach what the Titans should do in the first round. Let's say Alt's gone at 7. Mm-hmm. I think the person that they should consult about where to go next, take a guy at 7, take a lineman, trade back, ask Bill Callahan. Mm-hmm. Hey, Bill, who's the next best offensive lineman? And I know, obviously, they would have already done this work. They're not doing this on draft night, but I'm just using this as an example. You consult Bill Callahan. Is Olafashnu right up there with Joe Alt? You should go ahead and take him at 7. Great, take him. Now you got your left tackle. Is Olafashnu more like the 12th best player in the draft and you have a potential trade back partner in the Vikings or the Broncos or the Raiders, and you feel confident that there's going to be one or maybe a couple of left tackles there that Bill Callahan really likes? Cool, then that's a move that you make. Bill Callahan's the X factor in a lot of this.
Yeah, he is. But, I mean, tell me what y'all think about it, because I understand you don't when say that guy has went off the board, say Alt, he goes off the board. So now you're picking best player available more than likely, because you don't say if Olufashinu is the second best tackle, but you don't have him as the 7th best player, you may have him as the 10th best player. Well, my thing is 10th, 7th, if you need him, take him. He's still a top 10 player, so you take him. I'm not, unless you can move out of it and move down to 10 and somebody's giving you something for and you're still able to get him at 10.
What about if the 4th best player available is there to you at 7? For example, if that's Malik Neighbors.
Mm-hmm. Then I think you do the same thing.
It'd be hard to pass up on the 4th best player.
What is your need? Because what you're doing is you're taking the 4th best player, the 7th best player. It's not apples to apples because they play two different positions. Mm-hmm. Where does Olafashinu or any one of these other tackles, Latham, where do they rank based upon the top tackle? The top tackle is Alt. Are they that far down from Alt that you got to pass on them because they're not the 7th best player and you got the 4th best player on the board? Is it that close, or is it that far away that you can say, well, I'm going to skip the tackle and I'm going to take Neighbors because he's the 4th, and maybe Olufashinu is the 15th. I can understand that, but if he's the 10th best player or the 9th best player, I think you're still in that window to take him.
You could justify.
Yeah, because he's still a top 10 player. That's what I'm saying. Because he's still a top 10 player. Yes, that's all I'm saying.
And that's where the Bill Callahan evaluation would come in versus the evaluation of the rest of your board at different positions. I see what you're saying.
I'm all about trading down. Mm-hmm. If I like my board and I'm not married to Joe Alt. Mm-hmm. If there are 3 or 4 other guys that I know, one of them's going to be there, I want the extra picks.
Willie's taking the anti-Rams approach.
Yep.
Give me the anti-Rams and the Baltimore Ravens approach.
Give me them picks. Willie, give me them picks, Donick.
He went from worry wart Willie to Willie giving them damn picks, Donick.
Give me them damn picks, Donick. All right, that is going to do it
Throws
for us
at the dartboard.
We'll be back tomorrow at 11 a.m. Stillman & Company is up next.
Be love and love on your people. Have a great day and peace.